Welcome in. Hi, hello, and welcome in. I am Eric Balkman. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship over at myffpc.com. You can connect with me on X at Eric Balkman. Of course, connect with the FFPC there at FFPC. You know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and of course, the FFPC. I want to welcome in tonight another great guest, a guy who is going to be going hard with us for the next 2 hours, getting you set for all those important Week 12 lineups, everything that you need to know for maybe the second waiver run of the FFPC coming up Sunday morning. You know him from all his work at Establish the Run at not J Daigle on the X. It is John Daigle. John, hello, good evening, and welcome.
Thank you for having me back on. We get to relink twice a year, probably. I know there are a lot of important people for you to get to, so always honored when I get the email to join you ahead of kickoff.
Yeah, and it's always fun to have you on. I feel like we've had you on this time. It's always weird to because the fantasy football landscape changes depending upon the type of season. We're in dynasty mode in March and April. We're in draft mode June through August. Then September through December, it's like waivers and lineups and everything like that. So tonight, I think it'll be more waivers, more lineups, and just sort of the state of fantasy football that we're in right now. A lot of injuries that we got to discuss coming up on tonight's show. John and I are going to go. We're going to start off with it's not on the show sheet, but I want to talk about this Brock Purdy thing to lead things off. We're also going to get into some Christian Watson talk. The Thursday night football game tonight, Pittsburgh and Cleveland. We'll get into what you should be doing with some of these guys tonight, be it benching or sitting them in a week where we have 6 teams on bye. John and I are going to form a weekly challenge Week 12 lineup coming up in the second segment as well for the FFPC, and then we'll get into your starts and sits coming up in the final segment of the program, kicking off at 8:20 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Now, if you are wondering, Balky, what are you talking about? FFPC Weekly Challenge? Yes, it's something I talk about on this show every single week. Just because we are into Week 12 doesn't mean you have to stop building FFPC teams. You can go right now to myffpc.com, myffpc.com, and play the weekly challenge. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. You just pick whatever players you want on either a 10-player or a 12-player team, depending upon if you want to play with kickers and defenses or not. And just watch them ride through the weekend. The only stipulation, you can only pick one player per team, just like the FFPC world-famous playoff challenge. So if you want Patrick Mahomes, you can't have Travis Kelce. You want Russell Wilson, you can't have George Pickens. That kind of thing going on. MyFFPC.com is where to go. Enter for as little as $35. Win up to $2,500 when you go to myffpc.com. MyFFPC.com is where to go. And obviously, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, by the way, scan the QR code that our producer Matt Deutsch has put up on the screen. That will take you right there as well. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight is obviously going to directly affect how you build these lineups for Week 12. And I want to kick things off in San Francisco. 45 minutes ago, Matt Barrows actually posted this on X. Matt Barrows, who covers the San Francisco 49ers, I want to say for the Sacramento Bee. I could be wrong. No, the Athletic. He used to be with the Sacramento Bee. He's now with the Athletic. Apparently, Brock Purdy normally speaks with the media on Thursday. He is not doing that today. The starter normally speaks on Thursday. They're not speaking to no quarterback is speaking to the media for the Niners today. Apparently, Purdy, and I've heard a lot of conflicting reports on this, John, that he made it through most of the session for the practice today and then had to duck out when it came to throwing the ball, and he was getting a lot of work done by the trainer on that right throwing shoulder. This is problematic for fantasy owners for a couple of reasons. Number one, 6 teams on bye this week. So largely, if you were counting on Purdy, you're going to have to panic and make a decision here of not only a player that can sub in for Purdy, and the second part, it's a 425 game. So you might have to pick a player that either is going at 1 and then just eschew starting Purdy this week, or a more limited pool starting at 425 Sunday night or Monday night, pick up one of those quarterbacks. This is really bad news for Purdy owners here, my friend.
I completely agree. And they did come out and say that Purdy will, quote, be fine for Sunday. It is a game, though, that I had worried about anyways, just based on what has happened with these 2 quarterbacks in particular. Remember, this is not a divisional round rematch that we're getting because the defensive coordinators have changed on both sides of the ball. And if that's the case, unlike last year when, for example, the 49ers only blitzed Jordan Love on 8.5% of his dropbacks, just 3 dropbacks total, and said, beat us this way, we'll send everyone back into coverage. That's not how you play Love this year because he's regressed across the board against the blitz. I blame Matt LaFleur. I think they've made play calling a little bit tougher for him than how easy it was for him to be successful against a softer schedule too, and the back half of last year. But Jordan Love against the blitz this year, literally outside of the top 32 quarterbacks in yards per attempt, 26th in completion rate. This year also, Purdy has regressed to just outside the top 10 in yards per attempt when under pressure as well, when that was his bread and butter last year, was literally completing passes in the face of duress, no matter what opposing defenses sit at him. So I've actually been skeptical of that total and matchup anyhow all this week, especially because it is, I don't know if it's the calf injury. I don't know if it's Jauan Jennings being dominant, but very clearly that's an offense that still lacks explosive. The entire point of getting Christian McCaffrey back, outside of him just being Christian McCaffrey, was to give the Niners finally an option in the red zone underneath to expand the field when it becomes condensed. And so far, it's been the same BS the past 2 games that they dealt with all year. They were 28th in red zone scoring without McCaffrey. Remember, they were first. They were top 5 in red zone scoring last year, 28th this year. McCaffrey comes back the last 2 weeks. They've been 50% on converting their red zone drives into touchdowns. That's 25th. Again, it's the same problem they're dealing with. So right now, the Niners offense does not have a ceiling either anyway. So it's a game I'm skeptical of across the board.
So, and this is like prior to the injury, obviously, with Purdy, just in general of those guys going, playing in that game. I look at what you have, and not you, John, but what the NFL has as pivots for Purdy, if you want to wait that long to see what happens. And when you say he's going to be fine, this was media, or this is Shanahan, or who said that Purdy should be good to go?
Let me double check on that real quick because I just got the notification, I think 10 minutes before we went live.
Okay. All right. You check on that. I will tell you this. The other guys that may or may not be available in your leagues, this is how bad it is. Bo Nix probably not available for pickup if you want to pivot that way. You could go with Gardner Minshew. You could go with Brandon Allen if he is the quarterback that the Niners go with if Purdy can't go. Other than that, I mean, all these other guys are taken. Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, Geno Smith. All these guys, it's Brandon Allen, it's Gardner Minshew, and that's it. So you may want to pivot at 1 o'clock. Although, John, I think in our experience, we have seen, obviously Friday is a big practice day for the Niners. We should get some information Sunday morning as well.
The exact quote, by the way, I misled you a bit. The exact quote is the 49ers are hopeful Brock Purdy will be fine. Okay. So sounds like it is going to come down more to Friday's practice.
Luke on X right now, and I think Luke and I saw the same video. I don't know who it was, but a member of the media who was at Niners practice said that Purdy made it halfway through and then was with the trainer for the rest of the time. Now, that could have been by design too. I don't know if that, maybe that was the case all along. Thursday practice, you don't want to push a sore shoulder, throwing shoulder this early in the week for such an important game. I don't know. Friday is going to be telling, so be paying attention to what happens in the injury report tomorrow. Remember, if you're playing in the FFPC, they do have a 10 a.m. waiver wire run on Sunday. So you're going to have all the information in front of you, or at least as much as possible, if you do need to pivot and make a choice, or maybe pick up a guy in those 1 o'clock games as well, if need be. Last thing I want to make on the Niners, you're playing Kittle, you're playing Jennings. What about Deebo Samuel in this game? Is there any trepidation about playing him, given the points that you already made about the San Francisco 49ers offense and knowing that his quarterback is, if he's playing hurt?
And again, we don't know if Deebo's still playing hurt because since this calf injury, that's really when he lost his explosiveness. It's got his carries taken away post-bye as well last week. Overall, I think Deebo's one of those players in season long where it gets a little easier, where maybe you don't like the outlook, but you still hold your nose and play him because you don't want to miss out understanding his ceiling. So guys like that, even like Nico Collins coming back from injury this past week, Mike Evans is another queue people will have. I just always play those guys. I never want to miss out on elite player ceilings.
That I start your studs, right? In rare circumstances, I will sit those players, but they are rare. It almost never happens, at least for me. Let's move on to Kansas City, the other Super Bowl team from last year, moving from San Francisco to Kansas City. Isiah Pacheco remains limited in practice today, was designated to return off of IR this past week, was not activated for Kansas City's game on Sunday against the Bills. All the reports seem to be pointing us in the direction that Pacheco will be activated in time for this game this week against the Panthers. They don't necessarily need him for this game, but I'm sure Andy Reid, Pacheco himself, and the Chiefs offense would like to get this guy back rolling before the playoffs. Assuming he is available this week, John, what are you doing with Pacheco in season-long leagues? And equally as important, what are we doing with Kareem Hunt? Do you have any kind of insight on how you think the touch distribution will go with catches and carries between these two players?
For what it's worth, and this is not by any means like the law, everyone can take this one down to the wire, but we are projecting Pacheco out at Establish the Run in our projections. We believe he comes back week 13, and everything we're hearing is that he will not play this week, which will then make the decision for Kareem Hunt against the Panthers easier to make. If Pacheco comes back this week, it's still a situation where I don't want to play him, but I do understand 6 teams are on bye. There's lots of injuries out there, and it's the Panthers. So perhaps you may need to. But if you do have a even relevant option, like Jaylen Warren, for example, I would still play Jaylen Warren over Pacheco tonight quite easily. Just because I still think in the first couple of games, it's not only going to be a timeshare, if not leaning towards Kareem Hunt to warm Pacheco up. I still believe Kareem Hunt in particular will have the goal line role because that's where he's been effective at. And that's going to make Pacheco a harder play throughout the fantasy postseason as well. But again, I am personally eyeing week 13 until we have to make this choice. Kareem Hunt still lacking a ceiling, but when you're averaging 25 plus touches per week, it doesn't matter. It's a guy you just play anyways.
And Luke, watching us on X, and Mr. Bakes a lot, have some great Thursday night football questions. I promise you we will get to those. Luke, I want to bring up yours right away as long as we're talking Panthers Chiefs. What's your confidence level of Chuba Hubbard against the Chiefs this week, knowing that Jonathan Brooks is also expected to make his debut, John?
Oh, it's more about Chuba versus the Chiefs defense, who no one has success against, as opposed to Jonathan Brooks. I believe Jonathan Brooks will come back, at least in this first game, and simply play Miles Sanders' role since Sanders was injured prior to the bye, and that equated to 6 touches per game. I don't think they're in any need to ramp Brooks up here. It's more about Chuba, in my opinion, not having a ceiling, as no one has a ceiling against the Chiefs front 7. Right. You can just put it on paper that you never play running backs against the Chiefs and the Ravens, and you will be successful 99% of the time. So I understand you probably need to, and it's fine. His touch floor is high enough, but Chuba does not have a ceiling this week. That's the concern, more so than Brooks out there.
Brooks is a guy that you would be sitting then, obviously.
Yeah. And I have that decision in a couple leagues. I definitely don't want to play him in his first game back. I'd rather have the evidence of a role first.
So the other thing, and we'll move on to talk about the Tennessee Titans backfield. We're hitting the running backs hard early on this show tonight. Tyjae Spears is in concussion protocol right now. Terry McCormick reports this afternoon he was not seen practicing. Brian Callahan was asked about this, didn't exactly sound like the most positive person in the world that Spears would be playing this week. I would imagine that we'll find out here shortly whether he is playing. I'm assuming he's not. And you say, okay, fire up Tony Pollard, but to borrow a line from Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. You're going up against the Minnesota Vikings this week. It's going to be a lot of volume for Pollard. Is it good volume? Is it good enough for Pollard to sneak in there as either a back-end RB2 or a flex in the FFPC?
I believe he can back in as a flex, if only for receiving all the touches. Also, it's going to be interesting because Will Levis has come back these past 2 weeks and has been better. Not only is offensive line holding up, he's making some smarter decisions on film, and even from a clean pocket when he's not under pressure, 8.9 yards per attempt the past 2 games, which is 7th best in the league. That's not how he was dealing prior to that shoulder injury. So I do have a little more faith in Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley, like behind the scenes, than I would in the past right now.
So that is that's the Titans backfield. And I was listening to the Establish the Run podcast that you were doing this week.
Thank you.
With Adam Levitan, and a lot of great stuff there too. Not only the waiver wire show, but also how to set your teams up for success going forward, especially when we get into the championship round of the FFPC coming up as well. One of the players that you guys talked about, and you especially, John, Roschon Johnson. Johnson was a player that he was a draft darling late in high stakes leagues, and then he became a drop. and then he became a pickup again, and then he became a drop again. And now what we saw last week against Green Bay, Thomas Brown taking over as the offensive coordinator. Whether this was a case of, because they're going up against Green Bay, who can be had against the run, we want these big physical backs in there. Maybe that's why Roschon Johnson got one of his higher volume performances of the season. I don't know. Is this a 1 week thing? Is this going to be a trend going forward? 10 carries, 33 yards, and a touchdown against the Packers last week. Your thoughts on Roschon Johnson? He's definitely got to be rostered. 6 teams on bye this week. Is he sneaking into flex territory, knowing that DeAndre Swift didn't practice yesterday, limited participant today?
I think so. It is still, if you're eyeing beyond this week as well, Roschon may not be the answer in the fantasy postseason. Very tough matchups against the Vikings, Lions, and then Seahawks. And for as poor as the Seahawks were against running backs, at least in the last 2 games, limiting Kyron Williams and Christian McCaffrey around their bye to just 3.1 yards per carry. They may have found something, which makes me a little bit concerned as well for James Conner this week. But overall, we did see, maybe because they needed the bigger back, as you mentioned. It could have also been a signal under Thomas Brown where they were just changing things up anyhow. But we did see DeAndre Swift's lowest share of backfield touches and Roschon Johnson's highest share of backfield touches. Swift's lowest share since week 3 when Roschon was first active, I should say, in place of Velus Jones to play more special teams. And so that could be the case. Swift already lacked a ceiling because he was not their goal line back. It's reminiscent of all the years we complained about Austin Eckler under Anthony Lynn, because that's what he didn't have in his bag, is that they would take him off the goal line for Melvin Gordon. That's what happened to Swift, which has always made me concerned about Swift's ceiling and whether he could actually win your matchup as an RB2. Now I would say he definitely can't, because Roschon has the goal line role and is mixing in between the 20s too. So I definitely think a flex option who you can get the touchdown out of, just because, again, he has that equity over Swift.
It's funny because now we see the rise of Johnson. They're probably both flex guys, right?
Yeah.
Both Swift and Johnson. You don't want to trust either one of these guys as your RB2. Definitely not Johnson, and probably not Swift anymore.
In any other week, I think it'd be easy to say, like, we're just not going to play these guys. 6 teams on bye and these injuries this time of the year, it's rough. Like, I get it. That's why I answer everything openly, because I understand I'm in positions where, like, I am starting the worst of the worst because I have to in some leagues. So
Right.
you do what you do.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I was looking at I play in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship for the majority of my leagues, and the league playoffs start this week. And I was actually looking at some of my matchups, and one of them I looked at and I'm like, God, this guy's team, I very beatable this week. I feel pretty good. And then I looked at my team, and mother of God, did I get hit by the buys? It's going to be tough. I think that league I'm starting like Gus Edwards and Jerome Ford and Justice Hill or something, because I'm missing like Breece Hall and James Cook and Chase Brown. It's bad. But this is what we do. We're going to try to help people through this, talk people through it tonight.
I think Dylan Laube is the worst player I'm starting this week.
And that's not bad. That's not terrible.
Maybe. We'll see. But yes, it's out of necessity.
We'll talk. I would definitely want to talk about that backfield, because there's a lot of moving pieces with the Raiders this week for sure. I'll get to that in a second. Actually, no. Perfect transition, John. You're the pro. I'm not. We are going to talk about the Raiders right now. Vincent Bonsignore, who covers the Raiders, said that Dylan Laube is, quote, expected to be a big part of the game plan, which is great, but it's also against Denver, which is a really, really tough team to get fantasy success against. I don't know if Zamir White's going to play. I don't know if Alexander Madison's going to play. This could be the vaunted lightning backfield of Amir Abdullah and Dylan Laube. Laube, you said, is the worst guy that you're playing this week, but clearly there is some upside here at least, right?
It is a bet on who Amir Abdullah is more so than who Laube is. Because remember, Laube has 1 carry at the NFL level so far, back in week 6, and he fumbled on that carry and has been scratched since. Couldn't even make the active roster in that time. But Amir Abdullah, the last time he had more than 6 carries in any game was back in week 18 of 2021. He definitely is not an early down grinder. And so I think that Laube will out-carry Abdullah. Now, what does that become against the Broncos? Couldn't tell you. Probably nothing. But again, desperate times call for desperate measures. So because of the PPR floor of Abdullah and what I am projecting as a carry floor for Laube, I will play both if you are that desperate.
So now I think this is going too far, but I'll throw Mile High Luke's question to you right now. In his FFPC league, he's got to make a choice, Amir Abdullah or Chuba Hubbard. Now, we just talked about Hubbard going up against that tough rush defense this week. Is that going too far? Would you still play Hubbard over Abdullah?
That's going way too far.
I'm
talking about Laube for, deeper leagues, 2 flexes, and you have everyone injured or on bye. Laube is not a player you actually consider starting over one you were actually starting.
All right, so don't overthink it, Mile
High.
Don't
overthink this.
Go with Hubbard in that matchup. Let's talk about the Packers backfield. Weird situation for MarShawn Lloyd. He
cursed.
It's so wild, right? Hamstring in before he can even start training camp. Then it was an ankle once he did start training camp. Then he comes into the season. I think it was re-aggravation of that ankle injury. Goes on IR, comes off IR. A couple of days later, he has appendicitis. Now he's on the NFI list. And I think what's interesting here, there's a lot of people that were on Lloyd when he got removed off IR. I'm of the opinion that I think he has a ways to go and probably does not have enough time in 2024, even if he was healthy, John, to surpass Emmanuel Wilson on that depth chart. So for me, I know a lot of people were scrambling to pick up Lloyd for the stretch run. And maybe this question has answered itself now that we may not see Lloyd for maybe the rest of the season. Who knows? But Emmanuel Wilson, to me, is still the guy in Green Bay. If you are looking for these injury away type guys, something that I know you look very closely at for your work at Establish the Run, to me, it's still Wilson here over Lloyd. And I don't know if it changes in 2024, even if Lloyd comes back.
I would easily write it off as a cursed season, especially if he were to return from appendicitis. And let's say in week 16, would we have any amount of faith if Josh Jacobs was injured in week 15 that they would then give all these touches to Lloyd? I don't think so, especially for an organization that historically brings their players back slowly from injury. Christian Watson, Aaron Jones last year included, Luke Musgrave this year as well. So I'm not buying it. I just think it's a cursed year for MarShawn Lloyd. Thus, Emmanuel Wilson's still one of those stashes you want to have in these deeper formats.
We were talking about the Niners earlier. I want to get back to it here. Jauan Jennings, 10 catches on 11 targets last week. He gets 91 yards and he gets in the end zone. This is against Seattle. He looks to be the number one receiver right now in San Francisco with Ayuk hurt, with Deebo Samuel, not being a, quote unquote traditional wide receiver one there. And they still have Kittle and obviously McCaffrey there. So Jauan Jennings may not be a capital letters wide receiver one, but he's putting up numbers right now. When you look at the quarterback situation there, how much trepidation, I should say, would you have if Brandon Allen ends up being named the starting quarterback because Purdy can't go? We don't believe that to be the case. We don't believe it's likely, but we do recognize there is a possibility of that happening.
You said not a capital letter wide receiver one. I may push back a little bit because 32 and 39% target shares the past 2 games. That's Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's a wide receiver one. And so to me, it's a player like CeeDee Lamb, honestly, if we get Brandon Allen, where I'm still starting Jauan Jennings because he hasn't shown us that we can't start him, even if it's bad quarterback play under center, since all he does is earn targets. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why I waited until this year, until he had to be tendered. Otherwise, he'd let go next year. But it is clear that Jennings, at 6'3", 215, is playing this X role to perfection. It's not a downfield guy like Brandon Ayuk, which is also why this offense lacks a ceiling now because none of these guys can get open downfield. But he still plays close to the line of scrimmage and earns targets. So I'm still starting Jennings, no questions asked. I think Deebo becomes the fringe option. But again, they can use him in so many different ways, including carries, that I'm still going to start Deebo even if Allen's under center.
He had the fear in him. Jennings had the fear in him this year because they inked Ayuk to the extension, right? Jennings was going to be a free agent. They paid Samuel, so he knew it was put up. And they drafted Pearsall with round 1 draft capital as well. So he knew this was a put up or shut up year, and he's definitely putting up.
Pearsall is the one who is more of a contingency option because he had that 46-yard touchdown a couple of weeks ago. But other than that, he has to bank on a long touchdown to provide value because he's just not earning targets, even at Deebo's rate when everyone is at full strength.
The thing that I think is going to be interesting this coming year, and maybe you don't know this, do they have to pay Purdy after this season, or is it after the 2025 season?
I believe it's next year.
Okay,
but they will probably begin negotiating,
right,
and then they'll have a choice of coming off of Deebo or just giving Brandon Ayuk just this past year this extension in week 1. I don't think he's the one that's going to lose out, but I don't know. They have a lot of things to navigate.
And they don't want to lose Jennings, obviously,
Right.
too. I mean, they may have to at this point, but they don't want to lose him. Somebody's going to pay him, whether that's the Niners and being able to navigate the cap to get that done. I
believe Jennings only has a cap hit of $6 million next year too, after they tendered him. So he's a player that you still keep for cheap at this level, and then you can figure it out around that.
All right. So that's good, at least, that they have him under control for one more season at a reasonable price, obviously. Another player that you had talked about on the Establish the Run waiver wire show, Christian Watson. I think this is on the waiver wire show. 4 catches on 4 targets, 150 yards this past week against the Bears. I have said all season, I stay away from Packers because I never know who is going to be the guy that week, whether it's Dobbs or Watson or Kraft or Reed or whoever. Can we start to trust Christian Watson a little bit more after one of his biggest performances of the season?
I believe so. And there has been a bit of a signal as well the past 3 games around Green Bay's bye. It's not only that Christian Watson these last 3 games has earned at least 19% of the team's targets, including coming out of the bye, and then they feed him a season-high 24% target share, but more importantly, why we couldn't trust the Packers receivers is because at least Watson and Wicks were the 2 rotating with one another. But now, in his last 3 games, he's run a route on at least 64% of their dropbacks, including this past week when he ran the second most routes among all their players. Wicks down at the bottom with only 8 routes altogether. They basically just ignored him, which is exactly what we need for Watson to get there, because we know he's arguably even matchup proof if they're using him as a full-time receiver. When he is at full strength, historically, he has shown us he puts up wide receiver 1 at his floor, wide receiver 2 numbers. And I think we're slowly getting that as the season goes along. Now, the rug has been pulled out from us in the past with this group, so I don't want to guarantee anything. It's also a very tough matchup. The Niners allowing the 9th fewest points per game to wide receivers from out wide, which is where Watson runs all his routes. But again, as a big-bodied red zone threat, that's who they love at the end zone as well. I still think he's a player where I don't mind trusting with 6 teams on bye, and then I'll cross my fingers when we look back on Monday that we have the full-on route participation once again, because then we can truly trust him every single week, even when no teams are on bye.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too, a lot of what Watson does now, in addition to what you're saying, when they can use him as a true wide receiver 1, that's great when they do that, and I think they've shifted to that. Jordan Love was dealing with a groin injury. He was dealing with a knee injury, and I'm living in Northeast Wisconsin, so I see a lot of Packers stuff. It almost seemed like Love was not trusting his body on a lot of plays. I shouldn't say a lot, a significant number of plays where he would normally throw the ball to Watson and let him make a play. I think that's been missing, save maybe like 3 plays so far this season where he put the ball up and let Watson make a play. We could start seeing more of that now, because I think Love is finally getting maybe as healthy as he's been since prior to week 1. Prior to the Bears game, that was the first full week of practice that he's had all season where he took every single starter's rep before he got hurt against the Eagles. So I think this Packers offense is starting to trend in the right direction, and I think Christian Watson could be a big beneficiary of it for sure. Let's move on and talk about the Los Angeles Superchargers here. Quentin Johnston, 8 targets this past week. He only catches 2 of them, but it did result in 48 yards and a touchdown against Cincinnati. This week, he goes up against the Ravens pass defense, which is not your at least older brother's Ravens pass defense. No. They've been giving up a lot this year. That game now is at 51 on Monday night. The total is at 51. Quentin Johnston, nobody wants, it's one of those things you don't want to talk about starting him like you had him in your lineup, but it might be one of those situations where even if 6 teams weren't on bye this week, you might look at Quentin Johnston as a flex. Touchdowns aren't sticky, but they sure have been sticky for Johnston so far this season.
To me, it's more about making sure we get exposure to the Chargers offense heading into the playoffs, because this is also not your mom's Chargers offense that opened the year with Justin Herbert dealing with a low ankle sprain, averaging 24 pass attempts per game. Since that time out of their bye, they're averaging 30-plus pass attempts per week. We even saw those last 2 possessions on Sunday night whenever they had to kill the clock. They didn't go to the run initially. They actually spent those 2 possessions. One of them, they only blew off 10 seconds on the clock because Jeremy Harbaugh loves Herbert so much that he let him throw 3 times in a row. They love and trust Justin Herbert, and he has been absolutely amazing since the bye, even getting design carries to have a high rushing floor the past 2 weeks as well. So I just want everyone from Justin Herbert. That's why I'm so high on Quentin Johnston, because he is still the number 2 wide receiver there, and he's not going to beat you like Lad McConkey. McConkey, who's already showing that against man coverage, he can win one-on-one. He has great advanced metrics behind the scenes so far against press and man coverage too. Johnston's still that guy that is top 5 in yards after the catch per reception, because unlike last year's coaching staff under Brandon Staley that sent him out deep because he's a big bodied guy, and they thought that he could catch contested targets. If they had looked at his profile at TCU, they would have understood that he's actually very bad at that. It's what haunted Chase Claypool throughout his career too. Yeah. Like, he can't make contested catches down the sideline. He has to be used like Brandon Ayuk underneath and then ask him to do everything after the catch. The coaching staff of the Chargers this year understand that, and that's why he's excelling. So I still love Johnston down the stretch.
Is there any love for Josh Palmer in a game that could turn into a shootout in Southern California?
I don't think so. Again, you could be desperate. I think there are still like maybe better options. FFPC, we're all sickos, so those wires are so bare right now.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of my top 10 for deep leagues in the established run waiver wire. I think I had like Marvin Mims, Adam Thielen listed was out there. Would I start Josh Palmer over those two? I think I'd still start Thielen over Palmer, but probably Palmer over Mims. It depends how deep you want to go.
What do you make of Thielen coming back this week too? Because obviously Jalen Coker has had his day and maybe is continuing to have his day in Carolina. You had flashes of Xavier Legette as well. But Thielen's the type of guy, especially in full PPR leagues like the FFPC, man, I look at a guy like that and it's just like, I know he's going to get right around 10 and maybe more. Can he do that against the Chiefs in his first game back?
I don't know, but he is the veteran. I think they might want to see him play with Bryce Young more, because the Panthers, as crazy as it sounds, remember, they're still only 3 games back in the division. They're competing to win here, while also, although I personally, you and I maybe the public have written off Bryce Young, I think the Panthers have seen enough probably in the last couple of games he started for Andy Dalton to where they're still in evaluation mode heading into next year with the top 10 pick. Maybe they don't want to go that route, and they will start earning more confidence in Bryce Young, as crazy as that seems, based on his rookie year. So I think we're close enough to what the Panthers are and being eliminated, but also competing, and that they will play Adam Thielen, and that will leave Legette in 2 wide receiver sets, Jalen Coker most likely then playing out of the slot in 3 wide sets, and thus I think Coker's the loser in that kind of rotation.
So if you were to rank them this week as far as startability, Coker would be 3rd, and then who would be 1st between Legette and Thielen?
Just because there's enough question marks about how much Thielen will be used, I'll take the higher floor on Legette over Thielen. Okay. But again, it's a situation where I want to pick up Thielen, and if you're desperate enough, I'm still playing him. But we could see as a veteran like 50% of snaps. We just don't know.
That Panthers-Chiefs game is scheduled for a 1:00 kickoff, I do believe. Yes. Chiefs are now 10.5-point favorites, total of just 43 in that game. So could be rough sledding if you're banking on Panthers this week. Down to Dallas, Jake Ferguson once again did not practice today. Mike McCarthy, I think, was the one that said he's kind of a long shot trying to get out of concussion protocol in time for this game on Sunday against the Commanders. And this is not a Jake Ferguson question for you, but Luke Schoonmaker, after Ferguson went down, which granted was early in that game, 10 targets. He catches 6 of them for 56 yards. And I know FFPC players are looking at this with dollar signs in their eyes saying, this could be my guy, at least for the next couple of weeks, not only to get to my league playoffs, but maybe win my league championship, depending upon how long Ferguson misses. What do you make of Schoonmaker this week in a game where the Cowboys are 10.5-point underdogs in a game featuring a total of 45.5?
He's what we need to pad for these bye weeks. It's not just last week. Remember, go back to week 2 when Jake Ferguson was out and Schoonmaker had 6 catches for 43 yards. He plays every single snap. They actually call plays for him flat and near the line of scrimmage. So those are easier fantasy points, not high as ceiling, but we know we're not playing Luke Schoonmaker to be Travis Kelce. We're just trying to get by with points. So he's peppered with targets every single time this year he's stepped in for Ferguson. I think it's just an easy lock and load play with Ferguson most likely out.
He was, and bear in mind too, you know this, John, but for the viewers, I'll remind you, he was a 2nd-round pick last year. This is not just some day 3, hey, he's going to play special teams and block on when we go with jumbo packages or something like that. This is a guy who has the draft pedigree. And I think the Cowboys never would have taken him if they would have known that Ferguson would have blossomed the way that he did. Schoonmaker has the talent. He's getting the looks. Cooper Rush, I had a lot of misgivings about him after week 10, where that Cowboys offense looked absolutely dreadful. But after this past week, a lot was in garbage time. I get it. 350 yards is 350 passing yards, right? And Schoonmaker is a big beneficiary of that. So I definitely like him this week as well. Big news out of the Big Apple this week. Brian Daboll has made the decision, and maybe I should say Brian Daboll in quotation marks, because I'm sure Mara and Sean had something to do with this as well. But they are starting Tommy Cutlets. Tommy DeVito makes his triumphant return under center for the Giants this week against the Buccaneers. Drew Lock still remains the backup, and Daniel Jones basically fell to 4th on the depth chart now that they signed Tim Boyle. And Daniel Jones, this is what I don't understand. He was playing safety for the scout team today. The whole reason you're benching Jones, I thought the impetus was to not pay him $23 million if he gets hurt. Why would you put him at safety on scout team? I don't get that. Like, keep him away from the field.
I agree with you. It's not the brightest organization, first of all, but they also at least had the red no contact jersey on him. Right. So they understood the assignment, but not really. It's odd.
Very odd. Very, very odd. So we know DeVito takes over. Now, I don't know how much of this was to sell tickets, because everybody in Jersey, everybody in New York loves Tommy DeVito, local guy, big cult following he gained last year. He also, from an on-field standpoint, understands the Daboll offense. He's been in the Daboll offense longer than Drew Lock, so there's that. This is not a Giants superflex quarterback question here necessarily, although you can weigh in on that. What do you think of DeVito? But this is more of a question like, Neighbors, is he still startable? Are we sure he is still startable? What about Tyrone Tracy? Is he still a guy that we would trust as a starting running back this week in this offense? Wan'Dale Robinson, is he going to keep up the PPR Ponzi scheme with DeVito under center? I look more at what the rest of the skill position guys, what do I think they're going to do under DeVito? I still think kind of what I was doing with them with Daniel Jones, I'm probably doing the same thing for DeVito, but I do want to get your opinion on it.
The metrics at Pro Football Focus actually have DeVito's uncatchable pass rate as lower than Daniel Jones this year. So I think we're going to get better quarterback play. Maybe not long-term, but this week it's a great spot. That game's going to be so much fun because both defenses can't do anything. The Bucs, for example, in 5 of their last 6 games before the bye, allowed at least 23.8 fantasy posts to opposing quarterbacks. The outlier in that 6-game stretch was Spencer Rattler, who got benched and was never going to get 20 points anyhow. Also remember DeVito, 5.5 carries, 31 rushing yards per game in his 5 starts last year. And the Bucs, Todd Bowles' defense this year, have played 4 rushing quarterbacks. And it was the big 4. It was Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Bo Nix, and Jaden Daniels, and they all either scored a rushing touchdown or rushed for 50 yards. So I think the floor on DeVito is very high in this game. Someone I'm excited to start in Superflex in what should be a back and forth matchup that goes over its total. And at least for Malik Neighbors, that's been the issue. The double-digit targets, as we were concerned about, haven't mattered from Daniel Jones. At least in this game, this is the best setup possible. So I think we do have a little bit of life for Neighbors finally.
So, which is good. Are you at all surprised? So I'm looking at the total in that game. You know, the Buccaneers throw the ball all over the field, and they get Mike Evans back this week. Bucky Irving is going to be obviously in concert with Rachaad White in that backfield. You have Cade Otton, who's gone ham as far as tight ends can go ham in the league over the last month or so. Total on that's only 41. And the Buccaneers are a 6-point favorite. So that's like, what, a 23-point implied total? Are you surprised that that's down? I mean, like, to me, I look at this game, like, if DeVito's floor is high, that means Neighbors should be good. Wan'Dale Robinson should be solid. Mike Evans, is going to do numbers now that he's healthy with Mayfield again. I'm a little surprised to see the total so low, though.
I agree with you. I think it's a total that's just off the board. I think it's just the market is way off and discounting DeVito too much against a very, very bad Bucs defense. That's the point. Also, the Giants allowing a league high in yards per carry. And so this is a game where Bucky Irving will probably go completely berserk too. I don't know how either defense stops the opposing offense, honestly.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. So I'm taking the over and I'm starting those guys in that game. Speaking of starting guys in tonight's game, we are about 35 minutes roughly before kickoff of this Browns-Steelers game. And we have a ton of questions to get to. Ray C, Mile High Luke, Mr. Bakes a lot, Luke on X. I know you have a lot of Tillman and Jerome Ford questions. We'll get to those right after we take a quick break. He's John Daigle from Establish the Run. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Our Thursday night preview is next here on the Better Sports Network.
We're telling ourselves happy stories about players we want to pick, less happy stories about players we don't want to pick. And part of that is being ready to abandon our own carefully crafted narratives when it's time to abandon them, right? Like, bail, this was not working, So like we come in with super hard opinions and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. The better fantasy players are the people who acknowledge quickly that, hey, this isn't working out. Doesn't mean you have to abandon a player, but it means you have to abandon the approach. And maybe you have to go with a different player. I mean, if people were playing Stephon Diggs last year down the stretch, they were only playing him because his name is Stephon Diggs. You have to be ready to acknowledge, hey, this guy's not getting the job done. I did it. Bloom and I had a big discussion about this last December, and I'm saying you can't play him right now, right? And I know that's a hard decision to make because why? FOMO. We're going to miss out on that big game. The minute I sit this guy down, he's going to have the big game. Well, maybe. But also, while he is not having great games, there are other guys on your roster having great games. And I think that's to me, the hardest thing about fantasy is like, when do I divorce myself from my narrative? When do I tell when do I acknowledge my happy story is not coming true? I need to figure something else out. And the people who are good at that are the people who are good at fantasy football.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network rolls on here as we are coming up on 18 minutes until the top of the hour. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the HSFF Hour, the road of his High Stakes Lowdown. He's John Daigle from Establish the Run at NotJDaigle on the X. EstablishTheRun.com is where you want to go. MyFFPC.com is where you want to go for the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Remember, there's still time to register for the Thursday Weekly Challenge. That will lock in about a half hour or so, but you can register now by scanning the QR code on the screen that our producer Matt Deutsch has put up there, as well as going to myffpc.com. 10 or 12 player lineups. Enter for as little as $35. Win up to $2,500. No draft, no salary cap. Put together your team. You can do it in minutes, and just don't duplicate players on the same team. So if you want Hurts, you can't have Brown. If you want Matthew Stafford, you can't have Puka Nacua. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. We'll actually submit a lineup coming up on the show tonight in about 20 minutes or so. We have to get to a lot of questions for the Thursday night game tonight. Kind of wild, John, that we have so many questions about a game with, what's the total? Like 36.5. It's 8-2 versus 2-8. But a lot of people, probably because there's 6 teams on bye. I want to kick things off by talking about the 2 quarterbacks in this game, Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. Now, I have to start Jameis Winston in a league where I have Joe Burrow on bye this week. I couldn't get around it. It's just the best of it's Argo. It's the best bad idea I've had is to start Winston this week. But your thoughts on Wilson and Winston, knowing there's 6 other teams on bye?
Not a player I necessarily want to start, but as you said, you may be forced to, and at least that's who I prefer. If you have the choice between Wilson and Winston, I lean still Winston because we've seen it didn't affect last week. And stepping back, that's what, I go on DFS shows, for example, throughout the week as well. And on paper, it seemed, based on what the Steelers and the Ravens are, that it was going to be a 60-point game. But then, like, you step back, like we did last year in the Browns-Texans playoff game, where at least on paper, you could say this Browns offense is going to destroy the Texans. Then you just zoom out and say, there's no way Flacco, who is unemployed and not starting till the last month, is ever going to beat the Texans defense. And last week on those DFS shows, I stepped back and said, there's 0 chance this game is going to get to 50 points because it's the Ravens and Steelers. Like, things don't work out like that. And so I think it was obviously it was then going to be low scoring. Tonight, too, it seems like that as well, where I know the Steelers are favored by 3.5. I'm not buying it. I have a big bet on the Browns plus 3.5. And at least we know without Alex Highsmith this year that the Steelers pass rush has dropped all the way to 30th in the league. Like, they need that extra edge rusher across from TJ Watt. And Jameis Winston, as you would expect, a completely different quarterback, Jekyll and Hyde, when he's under pressure compared to when he's not. So I do think the Browns passing game has a little bit of life. I know everyone's concerned about the weather. No one, me, you, Eric, the listeners, the watchers, no one's ever made a good fantasy decision based on weather in their lifetime. So I don't like to overthink that situation either. 20-mile-per-hour winds aren't anything. Like, they aren't everything, but they aren't nothing. It's not anything I'm too concerned about, honestly, when making fantasy decisions, unless I'm very much nitpicking choices here on coin flips opportunities. So I'm fine with starting Winston, honestly.
And Matt, producer Matt, told us before the show, like when he looked at the camera shots on Prime Video before the weather looks solid, and we'll see. Matt also saying current weather condition in Cleveland right now, 37 degrees, 20-mile-an-hour winds, gusts, light snow. If you had to rank the weather conditions, and I know you're not a weather guy, that's fine. But if you had to rank the weather conditions from most concerning to least concerning, how would you rank snow, rain, wind? How would you rank those?
Rain is by far the worst. Yeah.
More than wind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we saw the Lions Packers matchup with rain where there was dropped touchdowns, dropped everything on the board. Jared Goff put gloves on because he couldn't even hold the ball. Wind, I think, is so overplayed. Again, anything 20 and under, I think Chris Allen, Kevin Roth, the two who are best at these things, I think they'd even tell you they don't matter. Like, it never affects the game. It's the gusts that go over 28, 30 miles per hour. That's when we start getting a little concerned, especially because gusts are unpredictable. Gusts could never come. They could come often. So that's when I start worrying about it. 20 and under, who cares?
Okay. So
snow. We saw Mahomes. We saw Tom Brady. We've seen far too many good performances in snow, so I don't worry about it.
So the cutoff for wins for you is 29 and under, whatever, 30 and above. Okay, I'll look at it.
30 and above, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. That's when I start getting worried personally. Over 25 is when you should really start looking into it. Okay. Based on like having done this for years and years, and this time of the year is when we always get back into these types of conversations.
Right. Exactly. Yes, exactly. I want to ask you because to me this game is shaping up to be a Najee Harris game more so than a Jaylen Warren game.
Yep.
Jaylen Warren, I invested heavily in my redraft leagues this year because I thought he was the more dynamic player. Obviously, injuries played a role in him underperforming to my levels, to my liking so far this season. I think a lot of people invested in him. And I think just now we're kind of starting to see maybe Warren could come on late in the season to become a flex. Is he a flex tonight against the Browns, knowing that, again, I think this game plays out more to Najee Harris's skill set, maybe more so than Jaylen Warren's?
I think so. Again, it always depends on your roster, but Warren is someone in these situations, and I have a lot of different styles of rosters out there. I think Warren's a guy where I'm starting him everywhere based on the circumstances that everyone else is facing. So the Browns are still allowing the fourth most 20-plus yard plays. Like they will leak despite having elite defensive talent. They will give up some big shots on you. Jaylen Warren is still the pass catching back there, 13 touches last week. So I think we're looking at 12-plus touches for Warren and maybe what the coaches perceive as a run-heavy game script. So yes, I still like Warren quite a bit tonight.
Would this is kind of a loaded question too, because it kind of depends upon the type of league you're in, but let's assume FFPC tight end premium. Would you consider benching Pat Freiermuth this week? Now, Freiermuth is a guy that was drafted, I want to say basically as a starting tight end during draft season this year, a player that if you waited on tight end, you could probably grab him and be okay with it. But if you look at what he's been able to do this season, it's not been great, John. We have 2 for 14, 3 for 17, 2 for 19, 2 for 51, 2 for 16. Granted, 1 touchdown in there as well. But that's over his last 5 weeks. It's been very underwhelming. Cleveland Browns defense, nothing to sneeze at. Like they can still bring it when they need to, and they'll need to tonight. But I wonder, Pat Freiermuth, normally I would never suggest benching him because in a tight end premium league because of the tight end scoring. But tonight, I think that I can make a pretty strong case that Freiermuth might be better off on benches, even with 6 teams on a bye.
It's, as you said, 6 consecutive games where Freiermuth hasn't recorded more than 3 catches. Darnell Washington's also in getting involved, not for a high target share, but they are scheming plays from underneath, which is why his reception totals are going up the past couple of games as well. And honestly, 12-team, 1 tight end leagues, not standard. PPR, Freiermuth is droppable. And so, like in a tight end premium league, you're really squeezing it in. I definitely don't want to be in a situation where I'm playing it tonight.
it's weird. Like he started off the season with 4, 4, 4, and 5 catches, and has not hit that 4 catch threshold since week 4, and we're in week 12 right now. So I don't feel great about it whatsoever. Let's talk about Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford in the Cleveland Browns rushing attack tonight. So Chubb I have in a few leagues, not a ton. I'm benching him. I don't feel great. Like it has not been vintage Nick Chubb so far since he's come back. And I kind of knew that going in. Like this is, the first year off just a catastrophic knee injury that he had last year. Plus time is not on his side, or age is not on his side. So I want to say like he's underperformed, but I kind of expected like, this is kind of what Nick Chubb is going to be in 2024. Is there any upside for him against the Steelers defense tonight? And what about Jerome Ford? Because I know, and we'll get to Mr. Bakesalak's question here in a little bit, but I know some people are thinking about, myself included, thinking about starting Jerome Ford tonight as well because of the bipocalypse.
The issue with Ford is that it has to be negative game script. He's like the rich man's version of Justice Hill, where Nick Chubb has never earned targets, has never run routes. He's not going to ever do that. So that's when Jerome Ford has come in and had success the past couple of weeks since he's returned. For Nick Chubb, there's just not an out. It's exactly what you thought it's exactly what we thought when we drafted him or ignored him, right? Because, we just did this conversation last offseason with Javonte Williams. Williams suffers a serious knee injury. Everyone gets excited about it. And then we get the exact run out we projected in March, is that he gets a career high in touches, but a career low in efficiency, a career low yards per touch. Nick Chubb comes back. Great. I'm very happy he's back. He's an amazing personality, but it's the exact run out we thought with a career low 3.1 yards per carry. He's a touchdown or bust option. So that's the thing. He has to fall into the end zone. If they get behind, though, Ford comes in and overthrows Chubb. I'm very much worried about Chubb in this game.
Two players that, I should say a game that we talked about earlier quite a bit. Let's throw it to Mr. Bakesalak on YouTube. He has to make a decision between Jerome Ford and Emmanuel Wilson for the Packers in that 49ers game at Lambeau Field, 4:25 on Sunday. He's got to make a decision on it tonight. Should it be Ford or should it be Wilson?
Ford still. Josh Jacobs returned from the bye last week with a season high, 84% of their backfield touches. Maybe that's an alteration that happens in that backfield moving forward. And so I'm just not trusting Emmanuel Wilson's touches enough to get us there. I'd still rather have Ford.
What's funny about the Emmanuel Wilson conversation is Green Bay and John, you would probably, I just know this by like the eye test. You might actually have the stats on this. I don't know if you can recall it off the top of your head, but it always seemed to me since Matt LaFleur took over, and quite frankly, maybe a little bit before that when Mike McCarthy was still in charge, the Packers love doing this whole, our starting running back gets the first 2 series, then our backup gets a series. Then our running back goes back in there for 2 series, then our back. So it's always like the starting running back would get 2/3 of the touches, 2/3 of the snaps, with the backup still getting enough. In a good matchup, you might be able to flex that guy out. I have not noticed that as much this year. I've noticed a lot of usage for Josh Jacobs, to your point of what you just said, both catching and rushing the ball. I honestly thought more was in the cards for Emmanuel Wilson this year, and I don't think it's because the staff doesn't trust him. I know they trust him. I know they like him. And I've had Wilson on a ton of my teams waiting for Jacobs to go down so I could deploy Wilson. Hasn't happened yet. And honestly, this week too, I think I'm with you. I think it's Ford over Wilson, but talk about that Packers running back usage, at least from the standpoint of where you see it.
It's another tough matchup, but again, given how they trusted Jacobs even more coming out of their bye, and those are always signals we look for at a team's bye, because that means they spent the last 14 days re-observing what they do best, and then usually shift, or what they couldn't do before the bye, and then shift things up a hair moving forward. And so maybe Jacobs does become closer to an every down back, despite throughout the offseason, and honestly, before their bye, them treating it like a rotation, even getting Chris Brooks a little bit involved as their third running back off the bench. But Jacobs definitely in a competitive game, someone I'm trusting more against the Niners this week, despite the tough matchup.
So we have a ton of Cedric Tillman questions here, and I'm gonna kick things off with those questions right now. Luke, who's watching us on X tonight, he's just kind of wondering Cedric Tillman in the weather tonight. It doesn't sound like you're too concerned about the weather we're seeing in Cleveland right now. What you would be doing with Tillman tonight, you would be doing with Tillman in normal outdoor weather on grass, right?
Yeah, I'm more worried about the expansive Browns target tree that is somewhat tough to predict week to week than about Tillman's opportunity. Tillman, in the 3 games that are Amari Cooper before their bye, at least 20% of the team's targets. Out of their bye, it fell behind Elijah Moore, who's been targeted on 25% of his routes with Jameis Winston under center. That's been his preferred target underneath. But I think the floor is still highest for those two, given the ceiling Tillman showed us. And then Jerry Jeudy popped last week. He had the big 90-yard touchdown. But Jerry Jeudy's still the one I'm most concerned about between the 3.
So if I were to ask you between Jeudy or Cedric Tillman being the better start, you would say Tillman over Jeudy.
I would absolutely say Tillman. Could be wrong, but I would absolutely say Tillman's the one I have more confidence in.
The question for Mile High Luke here, he has to make a decision based on 3 receivers here. He's got to decide between Josh Downs, Cedric. Oh, I'll take that back. Matt has the other one up. Let's talk about that one real quick. Matt, you can throw that one back up if you want on the bottom of the screen. So is Christian Watson, Cedric Tillman, or Chuba Hubbard. He can, and this is Scott Fishbowl, by the way. He can only start one of those 3 guys. Congratulations on having a better Scott Fishbowl team than me to have that decision in front of you. But who would you be benching? Which one of those guys would you be starting between Christian Watson, Cedric Tillman, and Chuba Hubbard? Hubbard against the Chiefs, Tillman against the Steelers, Watson against the Niners.
I think I'd take the floor and start Chuba.
So
I have enough question marks between Tillman, the weather, again, large target tree, Christian Watson, and his role, who could, as much confidence as we're gaining in him. Again, we've seen this before, and so we're just not sure. Whereas we know, I shouldn't say no because Jonathan Brooks, but I think it's safest, the most predictable outcome, that Chuba gets 18 plus touches.
Scott Fishbowl, half-point PPR too.
Yeah.
So it should slant, in favor of the running back here as well. So there you go. And then the other one he had, I'm assuming this is full PPR. Receiver question. Josh Downs, Cedric Tillman, or DeAndre Hopkins? Hopkins against the Panthers. Josh Downs this week for Indianapolis. I have to look that one up. He is at home against Detroit. So that could be a big-time positive game script for him. And then Tillman against the Steelers tonight. If you could only pick one for Mile High Luke, who would it be? Downs, Tillman, or Hopkins?
Quite easily Josh Downs. Josh Downs is showing that he is the Colts' best receiver. He's earned a team-high target share from both Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson. It was arguably Anthony Richardson's best game in his career as a passer last week in his first game back as well. It was against a very miserable Jets defense that regresses every single week. We want our receivers to go against Sauce Gardner. No, he's not Sauce. He's Cook now. He's Cook Gardner because he doesn't matter at all anymore. We want our receivers to go against him every week now since Jeff Ulbrich took over. They just lost all the foundation of defensive coaching underneath this new coaching staff without Robert Saleh. But Josh Downs is the one who very clearly shown he's a wide receiver too every single week. Don't overthink this.
Yeah, and I screwed this up. He has to bench one of these guys. So you're obviously starting Downs. Then are you benching Tillman or Hopkins? He's got to start 2 of these guys.
I actually think I bench Hopkins, as crazy as it is.
Wow.
Again, you don't have to listen to my advice. It's a coin flip, but Hopkins is just such in a tough situation. Juju Smith-Schuster comes back. Hopkins only runs around on 51% of dropbacks. He had that big game with 2 touchdowns where he was the wide receiver 7 in fantasy, but his highest finish around that was the wide receiver 33. He's been unusable in 2 of his 4 games, like not even flex worthy. And so I just think they have way too many bodies there. And that's not how they use their offense, utilizing one receiver. And so I'm worried about Hopkins, honestly.
2 for 29 against the Raiders. He played limited snaps in that game. Then he has the big blow up, to your point, against Tampa. 4 for 56, 3 for 29. Kind of underwhelming after that. And then, again, this game, how much is Kansas City going to have to throw in this game? Maybe not so much. I don't know. We got another question here. Brad Northcutt on X. Yo, Daigle, Goff versus the Colts or Drake May against the Dolphins? This is a slam dunk for me. It's got to be Goff, right?
Yeah, I don't know about slam dunk because May has been in his 5 full starts. He scored enough to be the QB 12 in points per game quietly behind the scenes. But I'm still taking Goff because it always comes to, well, I shouldn't say it always comes down to, because we saw last week, it did not come down to a competitive game. It was not a competitive game, but it didn't matter because the Lions went full boots to throat on the Jaguars, and Goff goes for over 400 yards. But it is a game that I think the Colts will be competitive. I have a bet on the Colts plus 7.5. I think they're live dogs to win in that game as well, based on the Lions' schedule and how they're just running into what is now a buzzsaw against Anthony Richardson. Everyone looks at the Lions' defense, but if you look behind the scenes, the Lions haven't played anyone on defense just yet, and they're still allowing the second most yards per carry to opposing quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson against man coverage, which the Lions lead the league with, is leading. Anthony Richardson himself is leading the league in 20-yard throws against man coverage as well. I think the Colts are going to fight back in that game. So I like Goff in a competitive game script.
Before we move on, Ray C, I see your questions on YouTube. We're going to get to those, both of them in a second here. I want to talk about Elijah Moore. Is he worth flexing tonight? You know, you talked about this expanding tree for the Browns, and we haven't even mentioned David Njoku, who's probably the number one guy out of all of them. But when you can take into account, like, Winston's going to be throwing to Judy, Tillman, is Elijah Moore still worth flexing? I know you like him more than Judy, and if Judy's worth a flex, I guess Moore would be worth a flex tonight.
Definitely. I think Moore still has a high floor. As I mentioned earlier, he's still been targeted on 25% of his routes, which is a team high mark from Jameis Winston so far. So, yeah, Moore, I think, is a fine floor flex play in PPR leagues.
Kev Wheeler, former co-host of this show, Cedric Tillman tonight or Jonnu Smith in the flex. Let's assume tight end premium scoring for this one. Who would you rather deploy in your starting lineup, Tillman or Jonnu Smith?
I assume tight end premium if you're asking Jonnu, and I'm going Jonnu in that case. I have enough confidence in Smith's role. His 50-yard touchdown, he got there because he was wide open. It was a joke of a defensive scheme from the Raiders. But still, he has more targets than Jalen Waddle on the year based on what this offense has become. I think what they're doing with Tua's career low 5-yard depth of target, I genuinely think Mike McDaniel is just keeping Tua safe. And that's why all they're doing is running one of the shallowest offenses in the league in front of the Broncos and getting everyone involved. Whereas last year it was only Tyreek and Jalen Waddle involved. But Jonnu, I mean, this role is just too good, honestly, in his last 5 games.
He's been fantastic. I had a question from a listener last week between Will Dissly and Jonnu Smith. I think it rings true again this week. Will Dissly Monday night at home against the Ravens or Jonnu Smith at home against the Patriots, John?
I still think Will Dissly. I'm such a sucker for Will Dissly, though. All he does is earn targets in one of the best offenses in the league. So it's nitpicking. Again, last week it would have been nitpicking as well. Like, it's Jonnu who gets there for 2 touchdowns, and not that Dissly had a bad game. That's the thing. I don't think you have a bad answer here. So if one of them creates a wide margin in points scored, I just chalk that up to luck, because we're literally asking who's the tight end 7 and who's the tight end 8 on the week. Who the hell knows? Right. But I prefer Dissly.
You're going with Dissly. I happen to agree with you there as well. Let's Ray C, let's go to you on YouTube. First one up is a running back question. He's got to bench one of these players between Najee Harris tonight against the Browns, Tyrone Tracy against the Buccaneers this week, or Rachaad White also in that same game against the Giants. Which one of those would you be benching? To me, I'm playing Tracy for sure. It comes down to Harris or White for me.
I think I'm still playing Najee, but if only because they did. Gosh, it's really tough. It's really tough. Evans comes back. Still have Otten. The Liam Cohen, Bucks OC, came out and did say that they evaluated their running back rotation during the bye, and they understand they need to get Sean Tucker a few more touches. What a few more is, I don't know. But it's enough to where Rachaad White has been so bad between the tackles that maybe Tucker also takes away from White. So I think I'm just going to go Najee for the floor. I get it if you want the PPR for Rachaad White.
Where does Tucker, for your injury away type guys, does Tucker chart on that chart?
Oh, yeah, high, because the Bucks, Jets, Rams, Panthers, those are the teams with like the easiest playoff schedules. And the Titans, honestly, even though there's not many pieces there. That's why I suggested trading for Calvin Ridley wherever you can right now as well. But yeah, I mean, the Bucs schedule is super soft. And so Sean Tucker is on near the top of tier 2. He's not like the Tyler Algiers and Blake Corums of the world, where if their starter gets injured, those guys are going to get every single touch. Yep. But Sean Tucker showed us just a few weeks ago that if Rachaad White's injured, he's capable of literally being the RB1 overall on the week. And so if either White or Bucky were injured, Tucker then takes that role. He has 2 outs. And so, yeah, of course, Sean Tucker's high.
Last question for the Thursday night game here tonight. It's a defense question. It comes from Ray C on YouTube. He wants to know, should he be playing the Browns defense tonight again at home against the Steelers, or are the Arizona Cardinals a better start, who travel to the Pacific Northwest to take on the Seattle Seahawks? For defenses, who would you go with, Cleveland or Arizona?
I think I go with Arizona, but man, it's so tough because I still don't know what the hell the Cardinals or the Seahawks are, to be quite honest. Last week, the Seahawks, the same thing they do every week. You can depend on a long snap fumble. They are very good at that. And then you can also depend on them not doing a damn thing on offense until the last 2 drives. And they did that as well. It took until Nick Bosa got injured for them to move the ball at all. And that's when Ken Walker finally got them on the board with that 1-yard touchdown run. And that's kind of who Geno Smith is. He showed us that last year as well. He's Jekyll and Hyde, whether he's under pressure or not. And the Cardinals are exactly even, like league average in pressure rate. So can they get to Geno? I don't know. If they do, it's going to be great for them. If they don't, Geno can absolutely light them up. That's why even like DFS this week, I'm going to have some Geno stacks, but I'm very aware that it could fail miserably. I don't know who they are. They're even dead last in success rate allowed through the air, but they never give up big scores. They somehow, it's the Jesse Pinkman meme. They somehow keep getting away with it every single week, despite the fact I keep losing thousands of dollars playing against them in DFS. So I just don't know. I feel like the levee's going to break at some point. I just don't know when.
I always appreciate a good Breaking Bad conversation or any kind of reference we get on that. So that was fantastic. Just like Walter White, they can't keep getting away with this. And I can't do a Pinkman, so I won't try. Bill Hollywood, flattery will get you everywhere. Great show tonight, guys. We appreciate it. He has a question. Jordan Love or Jared Goff? Which quarterback are you starting this week? Goff at Indianapolis, Jordan Love at home against the Niners. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but go ahead.
It was close enough with the May question in Goff because May adds a rushing floor. Love obviously does not. Thus, I think that's a little bit easier, and I'm going to take what I believe is the better game script with Goff.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm actually going to be at that Packers-Niners game. Very excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm just hoping it's not a slop fest because I don't not for fantasy. I just don't want to stand in that the whole time.
Of course,
at Lambeau Field, right? Exactly. But I'm very excited to see what happens in that game. I am still with you. I think Goff is the better play here. That will complete our Thursday night football preview. The game is slated to go off in about 10 minutes or so. We will bring you updates at least through the first quarter into the second quarter tonight. John and I will. But let's get into the FFPC Weekly Challenge. John and I are going to submit a lineup right now for this. We will not pick any Browns or Steelers because there's no way you'd be able to submit this lineup in time if you want to dupe us or if you want to submit a variation of this lineup yourself. What we are doing is the FFPC Weekly Challenge. MyFFPC.com is where to go for this. You can enter for as little as $35. You can win up to $2,500 in this competition. You can play with kickers and defenses. We're going to submit a lineup that does not feature kickers and defenses tonight. No restrictions on players except you cannot have 2 players on the same team in this lineup. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. It's all fun here. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. So let's submit our lineup now, John. You play a lot of DFS. I think there's a lot of crossover between the weekly challenge and the FFPC and DFS. Where would you like to go? We have to figure out a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 4 flexes here. And by the way, scan that QR code on the bottom if you want to join that Matt has put up, and you can join that right now. Where are we going to start this week?
And there is a salary cap or no? We just get
no salary cap.
Oh,
whatever.
shoot.
Yeah, whatever you play. So I would assume we're going to go with a lot of elite talent here. I don't think we'll do chalk across the board. I mean, there's always kind of some variation, but not a ton. But this is the great thing about this. The only restriction is you just can't have 2 players on the same team. Otherwise, go hog wild, man.
Well, then let's save the Commanders. Let's save them at quarterback. Let's go somewhere else because there's 7 good quarterbacks on this slate. Honestly, we're not going to pick anyone else from the Colts. Maybe we go Anthony Richardson, take that floor.
You want to go Anthony Richardson at quarterback?
I think we go Anthony Richardson
at
quarterback.
All right. Dude, I love this. A lot of times, and we do this every week or whatever, it's always like, Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts or whatever. But this is kind of cool that we're going Richardson right away because there will be some Richardson lineups, but he is going to be far from the most owned quarterback. And you talk about the floor. Is it because of what he does with his legs?
Oh, absolutely. And again, the Lions defense, although they are touted behind on the scenes, on the surface, they haven't played anyone. And maybe Richardson is no one again, but like they played Jordan Love in that rain-weathered game where everyone dropped the ball. Dontavian Wicks dropped a touchdown in that one. Jared Goff had gloves on. They played CJ Stroud without Nico Collins, which the Texans without Nico Collins are not a real NFL offense. So like we just don't know without Aiden Hutchinson if the Lions are even league average or not. I think the Colts are going to test him this week. And plus, the best part is like you can't run to the Lions, so we're not going to use the Colts players anywhere else. Whereas like someone like Lamar Jackson, we can still get leverage and play Derrick Henry.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm just looking at this too. 50.5 for the total. Colts are 7.5 point underdogs. I think Richardson's throwing gets a bad. It's weird because I don't, and maybe you have the stats to back this up. The eye test for me, I look at Richardson, I'm like, God, this intermediate stuff, he's not all that great at, but the deep ball accuracy has been really good. And when you have guys like Alec Pierce and Josh Downs on this team and maybe Michael Pittman, we'll see. Like the big play possibilities with his arm and his legs, you never like to count on those, but it seems like he's been able to do it whenever, pretty consistently.
And that's why in like a challenge like this, you take the quarterback because you mentioned all the names. Now throw in AD Mitchell as well. And we just don't know where the ball is going to go confidently. So we soak up all of that equity by playing the guy delivering the ball.
So that Colts Lions game is one of, I felt like there was more. Maybe it's only 2 this week. I guess there's only 2 games of with totals of 50 or higher, but that's one of them.
Yeah, there was 3. There may be 2 now. It's the Ravens Chargers, the other one.
That's the other one. The Eagles and Rams are at 49.
It's been coming down, and honestly, it should. The Eagles defense is too good.
Yeah,
I think that one's definitely going to go, in my opinion, under its total.
The next closest one after that is Cardinals Seahawks at 47.5. So there you go. Okay, so we got our quarterback, which is good. Where are we going in the backfield? Are we going on the perimeter, tight end? Where do you want to go next, John?
Well, since we didn't use Lamar Jackson, let's get some leverage. We know we can only play Lamar or Derrick Henry, so let's play Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry will be our first running back this week. He is one of those primetime players that will be under the lights, hopefully performing big numbers for us against the Chargers. Again, a total of 51 in that game. And what's the Chargers' rush defense been like so far this year, John?
It's been okay. They're one of those teams that also like didn't play anyone before they played Joe Burrow, and then he went for 350 and 3 touchdowns. It was like a litmus test, and they failed the litmus test miserably.
Right, exactly. I love this this 1-2 punch we have with Richardson and Henry right away. Lot of floor here, but significant ceiling with both these guys. Where are we sticking in the backfield? Where would you like to go after the Henry? Yeah,
there's a lot of good backs. We probably won't use any other Dolphins, so let's go Achane here.
Okay.
Achane now quietly in the last 2 games. It's not just that Raheem Mostert has been benched for Jalen Wright on early downs. All of a sudden, Achane is handling 70% of backfield touches in back-to-back games for the first time all year. Like, I would only pick Christian McCaffrey rest of season. That's over Saquon Barkley as well, because Achane's usage is too good. It's literally a top 5 2025 pick, and someone with that type of usage is poised for at some point a multiple, if not multiple, 200-yard games from scrimmage.
He has had at least 4 catches in each of his last 4 games. He only had 37 yards rushing against the Rams, but otherwise he was getting well over 60 yards dating all the way back to week 5. Usage is going up, and to your point that you made earlier when we were talking about Tagovailoa, this is Mike McDaniel's way of keeping Tagovailoa healthy and upright and getting the ball out of his hands quickly. We have seen Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane, Jalen Wright to a certain extent as well, be very involved in the passing game. And Achane is a guy that, I don't see any reason why he's not going to be ranked among the top 5, maybe even top 3 running backs every game the rest of the season. So I love Achane. I love the call here. Again, high floor and high ceiling potential too.
Okay. So this is FFPC. So 2 wide receivers and 2 flex, right?
No, it's 2 wide receivers, a tight end. But then because this is the weekly challenge on it, we get 4 flexes, John.
Good grief. So, okay.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. It's a lot of fun.
Let's start taking away wide receivers, and let's get this Richardson stack going with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy that continues to put up big numbers. He is going to, you would think, put up big numbers in this Colts game featuring a high total. I always hesitate with Lions this year, and this is maybe more of a Jameson Williams thing than Amon-Ra St. Brown. But when it comes to picking Lions, I always feel like somebody's getting the short end of the stick because not everybody is going to be fantasy. They're not all going to have great fantasy weeks. I think Gibbs will. I think Montgomery's going to be solid. St. Brown. And then after that, I don't know about Williams and Laporta the first week back. So I like the idea of getting St. Brown. Again, a guy, high floor, high ceiling as well.
Let's keep up with what we mentioned, be consistent here, and talk about the Malik Neighbors comeback game from Tommy DeVito. I like getting Malik Neighbors a buy low opportunity here from arguably the more accurate quarterback than Daniel Jones.
Do you think so? There's not going to be any playbook restrictions on DeVito this first game, right?
No.
But part of the reason DeVito's in there, I think, is because he's been playing in this system longer than Locke, and maybe could be. I mean, is it weird to say he could be an upgrade over Daniel Jones for fantasy purposes for the skill position guys?
No, it's not weird because he took sacks. He literally led the league in sack rate when under pressure. But again, the Bucs don't do anything good, like nothing good on defense. So I'm not too worried about DeVito in this game. I still like Neighbors in particular, though.
And he should see double-digit targets this game, right?
Yeah, he's been seeing double-digit targets. He'll continue seeing double-digit targets. What he'll do with those targets, how accurate are the target's going to be.
And how deep are they going to be down?
Again, and that's what we're betting on, though. We're betting on something we haven't seen because we have to do that.
Okay, so Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors are the two receivers. We have 4 flexes and a tight end to fill here.
So I'll leave it up to you. If we can play Derrick Henry with Will Dissly, but also if we don't use Travis Kelce, we're not going to use any Chiefs because they spread the ball out. So would you rather have Kelce or Will Dissly?
I'd rather have Kelce, even because the other thing too, if we don't take Dissly, it leaves open the possibility that we could either take Dobbins or McConkey.
I'm not letting you take Dobbins against the Ravens. Zero chance.
So then McConkey would be available if we don't take Dissly. So
and I like McConkey, so let's go Kelce here because we're not going to use any other player for the Chiefs.
Right. Okay, I'm on board with that for sure. Travis Kelce is our tight end. So we have everybody. Now we can just go hog wild here and pick whatever the hell flexes we want. Running back, receiver, tight end.
Running back, receiver, tight end. So 3 more spots.
4 more. 4 more.
4 more spots.
We got 4 flexes, but we can go with any of those positions.
Calvin Ridley. Let's go here now.
Calvin Ridley. Okay.
39%, 30%, 39%, and 21% of the team's targets without DeAndre Hopkins. Also, Will Levis has been much better since returning. We talked about him earlier. And without Will Anderson, the Texans are only creating pressure on 32% of dropbacks. So if Will Levis is going to have a clean pocket to throw, he's going to hammer Calvin Ridley.
And they are 8-point dogs, so he might have to hammer him quite a bit if they want to stay in that game. Calvin Ridley will be our 3rd wide receiver. All right.
Do you prefer Brian Robinson or Terry McLaurin?
You know, normally it's McLaurin, but then what happened last week gives me a lot of pause. And I think that if we look at this Commanders game, this to me screams a Brian Robinson game this week. And I know everybody's talking about a get-right game for Jaden Daniels, but 10.5-point favorites, to me, I think this could be a Brian Robinson finding the end zone a couple of times and threatening 100 total yards. So I think I like Robinson better.
Let's go Brian Robinson. Returned from injury last week against the Eagles and handled his highest share of carries since he suffered his first injury initially since the beginning of the year. So he's clearly at full strength with 10 days to rest. I love a big Brian Robinson. I think all of them do well, but I love a big Brian Robinson game here.
When you say all of them, Zach Ertz, do you also include him in having a good game?
I think all of them go nuts. I like the Lions.
All.
Like the Lions last week. I'm assuming Jaden Daniels, 10 days of rest is past that rib injury. It's the Cowboys. Cliff was called out for not rotating his receivers because he keeps them on the same side. Noah Brown plays the right. Noah Brown plays the left. Terry McLaurin plays the right side, and he doesn't rotate him at all. And the last time he got called out for not throwing deep, he came back out against the Bengals in week 3 and started taking deep shots. I think he's heard the message, and we get the full-on 40 burger from the Commanders this week.
That'd be great because I have a lot of healthy Jaden Daniels teams, or a healthy shares of Jaden Daniels and some McLaurin. So I'd love to see it if that happens this week. So we have 2 positions left here. They can be a running back. They can be a receiver. They can be a tight end. We can go any which way you want here, John.
Brock Bowers. I think that's
Yeah.
how we're going to get.
You're not going to get any argument for me on Brock Bowers for sure.
Okay.
So Brock Bowers, even against the Denver Broncos defense this week,
they can't match up with Brock Bowers. Yeah.
No, and who can? And that's the thing. Like, my big concern when Luke Getsy got let go and Scott Turner took over at OC, my whole thing was like, just keep Bowers as your meal ticket and keep Jacoby Myers relevant. They did both those things last week. I feel really good about it. Bowers is a guy that it doesn't matter who he's playing. He's going to get the ball a lot. So I love Bowers here. Tight end premium format too, to remind the viewers. One spot left, John. Where are we going?
I think the two we're down to are Christian McCaffrey, Cortland Sutton, or Ladd McConkey.
Okay. I would put Sutton third on that list. Okay. So then it comes down to McCaffrey against the Packers on the road, or Ladd McConkey, who's been very.
We're going to get the floor for McCaffrey regardless. Like, it may not be a ceiling game, but you know where we're going to get every single snap and every touch.
I just think in something like this, let's lean towards the elite, right? And McConkey's great. He's not elite. McCaffrey is still an elite option. So I would lean towards the usage of Christian McCaffrey.
Okay, let's go McCaffrey and then ask, would you rather have McConkey or Kelsey? Because you can move Bowers to the tight end slot and eliminate Kelsey.
Right. What I read,
how rostered is Kelsey going to be?
He will be heavily owned. But bear in mind that, well, yeah, I guess you're right.
I wouldn't mind leveraging McConkey over Kelsey. Getting the little Ravens Chargers game stack.
You know what? Screw it. Listen, I love doing that. I like playing the guys on these primetime games when they're under the lights. I always figure those players come to play more so than the other ones. Kelsey may not be used a whole lot this week either against Carolina. He may not have to be. So yeah, let's do McConkey in that sieve of a pass defense for Baltimore. I like this lineup here. To remind you, John Daigle's FFPC Weekly Challenge Week 12 lineup is this: quarterback Anthony Richardson, running backs Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, Brian Robinson, Christian McCaffrey. The receivers are Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Calvin Ridley, and Ladd McConkey. The tight end is Brock Bowers. You can dupe that lineup, you can modify that lineup, or create your own at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Play this 10-team lineup, or a 10-player lineup, or a 12-player lineup. You can enter it in a 10-team, 30-team, or 100-team competition. MyFFPC.com is where to go. Enter for as little as $35. Win up to $2,500 now at MyFFPC.com. We got real football underway. Nothing of note has happened yet. It looks like the Steelers are they're not going to be punting. They are in Browns territory. And we will let you know what they're doing when we come back. They're not in the red zone yet. If anything happens, you will hear it first. John Daigle established and run, my co-host this week on the FFPC Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show. I'm Eric Balkman. We roll on with your starter sick questions right after this. Something called perpetual reloading to ensure something called a permanent championship window with FFPC Dynasty Leagues. How do we make sure that perpetual reloading is what we're doing in our rookie drafts every year to make sure that we're always competing for titles year in and year out?
Yeah, so we always have this tension between playing a little bit for the future and playing for the present. You'll have drafters jump into the startup. They'll draft the veterans. They're trying to win in that first year. Sometimes they do. I don't want to in any way, shape, or form suggest that doesn't work, because you see some of those teams compete and win titles. And yet, when we're thinking about the best way to control your chances to win, you want to be in the playoffs year after year. You want your championship window to always be open. You don't want to get to a point where you build, and then have a couple of years where you're going for it and then you're rebuilding again. You want to be in it every year. You want to get as many buys as possible so you don't have to compete in that quarterfinal round. You build a more powerful team. You can't control the injury that you have to the key player that cost you a title, or the 50-point game that a non-elite player like an Amari Cooper scores and knocks you out. You can control having one of the best teams every single season. The way that you do that is you build depth in your player talent across all those positions. You build depth in your picks. In order to execute some of those types of things, you trade down, you trade peak players, you trade young players. You've got to trade things that people want. A lot of times I think when people are trying to reload or rebuild, they're trying to trade distressed assets at a level that the rest of the group isn't interested in, and then you feel like you can't move. If you're going to make trades, you got to trade things that people want. You can also trade 2-for-1.
25 minutes past the top of the hour. You're watching the FFPC's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network tonight. I am Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship. He is John Daigle from Establish the Run, not Jay Daigle on the X. We do have a break in the action in Cleveland right now. The hero from last week with all those made field goals against Baltimore, of course, went from the penthouse to the outhouse. As there's no shame in missing a 58-yard field goal and what looks to be some significant precipitation going on in this Steelers-Browns game. But Chris Boswell comes up empty on the 58-yard field goal attempt. The Browns now have it at their own 48 when we resume action. Russell Wilson, 3 of 3 for 31 yards, including a 22-yard pass to Pat Freiermuth. Jaylen Warren, 2 carries for 22 yards thus far. That is what's going on in that game. Let's get into some start or sits tonight. Let's start with, let's go with running backs here to lead things off. So we talked about this Commanders-Cowboys game, and you have a really talented lineup offensively that's made to be look better. Or it's made to look better with Jaden Daniels at the helm. But certainly there's a lot of fantasy goodness here against Dallas. Would you play Austin Eckler over Rachaad White this week, John? Rachaad White, who's going up against the Giants?
I would not. I'm still playing Rachaad White, if only because, again, I'm projecting. I could be wrong here, but I really think we got the team high targets for Eckler last week solely because the rib injury, in order to avoid Daniels taking more hits and waiting for longer shots. That's something we heard behind the scenes too at ETR, was that's how they were going to scheme against the Eagles last week, understanding they can collapse the pocket. Jordan Davis even played 100% of the snaps. Yeah. So they were clearly onto something there. I don't think we get that this game. I think we're right back to the old Commanders offense in the first month, which is a good thing. So I'm playing White over Eckler.
Mr. Bakes-a-lot has a trade question here. This is redraft. This is not dynasty. He has the opportunity to sell Kenneth Walker, and in return, he would get Tyrone Tracy and Brock Bowers. I always like getting the best player in the deal, and the best player in this deal might be Brock Bowers here. Plus, you're getting Tyrone Tracy to take Kenneth Walker's place. I would take that downgrade at running back for that massive upgrade at tight end. Obviously, kind of depends who your tight end is, Mr. Bakes-a-lot, right now. But I like this deal, getting Tracy and Bowers in exchange for Kenneth Walker.
And we said this is redraft, right?
Not dynasty. Yes. Right.
Oh, yeah. Redraft. Make this deal.
Trey Benson, a guy who has sort of already turned the backfield in Arizona into a mini RBBC or maybe a normal RBBC at this point. Trey Benson is coming off the bye week this week, John, to take on the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Would you play him over Justice Hill, who I believe is still in concussion protocol? Granted, they don't play until Monday night, but would you play Trey Benson over Justice Hill this week?
I would play Trey Benson over Hill anyways, even if we were cleared. They have been using Benson a hair more. James Conner's been sporadically banged up, but it has clicked for him the past few games. He's now in his last 2 games for the bye, rushed for 142 yards on 21 carries, so it's 6.7 yards per touch. He's been great. And so even if he gets only like 8 touches, I think it's enough to matter with 6 teams on bye.
Mr. Bakes-a-lot has Zach Ertz in that deal. Yeah, if that's your tight end right now, upgrade and get Bowers for sure. This is another one, and I always like to pepper these in here because with all these teams on bye, there's going to be tough decisions. There's going to be decisions you wish you didn't have to make, but you have to make them anyway. What about Zach Charbonnet? Ironically, Kenneth Walker's backup in Seattle. Would you play him against the Cardinals at home, or would you rather go and wait until Monday Night Football when Gus Edwards is in his revenge game mode against the Ravens in SoCal on Monday night?
I would still play Edwards, even though it's not going to be good. Maybe we can fall forward for a touchdown. But Charbonnet's the same thing as last year. In 13 games behind Kenneth Walker, he averaged 6 touches. This year behind Kenneth Walker, he's averaging roughly 6 touches. And they're an offense that can't run the ball. Their offensive line is absolutely horrendous at creating space to run, which is why Kenneth Walker's struggling. Luckily, Kenneth Walker still has the pass catching role there, so he has a high floor. But I'm just taking Edwards touches and crossing my fingers.
I keep waiting for the wheels to fall off with J.K. Dobbins, and it just hasn't happened yet.
Well, they actually have.
They're loosening. They're loosening.
He's been like Nick Chubb on. I know he broke the big run, but he's been like Nick Chubb. He's been very inefficient. He's just wearing touchdown deodorant. That's right. Literally all it is. So if he scores touchdowns, of course it's going to mask his inefficiencies. But he scored the big run. The past 2 games, his share of the team's touches have been closer to 60-40. That wasn't the case without Gus Edwards. Since Gus Edwards returned, he has been taking touches. He scored the long touchdown that he should have slid on and did not.
Is the revenge factor, a revenge game, a real thing for you, John? For these players? No?
No, I mean, it varies. There are some players, some coaching staffs to where it does matter. Tom Brady was someone who infamously always got his guys contract incentives. And so that was something we could hang our hat on. We're still kind of waiting, though, for the confident options to actually do those types of things this year.
Let's move on to receivers here. We talked about the Packers receivers earlier, and not knowing when it's a good week or not. I don't know how you feel about Romeo Doubs in general, but I do want to get your take on him, not only for this week against San Francisco, and then compare him to Xavier Worthy, a player that everybody was falling all over themselves to draft in rookie draft season, and even in regular redraft season, as a player that could be the number 1 or maybe a high-end number 2 for Kansas City this year. It hasn't really happened, at least so far. But if you pit these guys against each other this week, Worthy against the Panthers, Packers against the Doubs against the Niners for Green Bay, which one would you rather play this week?
I can never pinpoint Doubs correctly because you know exactly what's going to happen. He's going to lead the team in routes run, and it's going to be hit or miss. And you can never really identify when it's going to be hit or miss. And so it's tough. I play Xavier Worthy personally. We at least got that signal last week when Tony Romo opened the game with Jim Nantz and even said, and anytime broadcasters talk about this before the game, by the way, it means that the coaches told them prior throughout the week. But they even said, Andrew Reid wants to feature Xavier Worthy. And they came out and certainly featured Xavier Worthy. It was only a 16.5% target share behind the scenes, but that still was something he was building on around DeAndre Hopkins. So maybe they understand that they need, like, it's not even a choice. They have to have someone of Worthy's caliber and talent to get open over the top when it comes to the playoffs, because they don't have that style of player. Over the top is not DeAndre Hopkins. Over the top is not Travis Kelce. It has to be Worthy. So I bet we do see him featured more over the second half of the season, if only because the Chiefs know the playoffs are all that matter. The regular season, who cares?
What do you think Xavier Worthy, what do you think his dynasty prospects look like right now? It's a
lowest point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Would you be trading to get Xavier Worthy right now on your rosters?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I can't imagine what it takes. I haven't looked at any deals lately, but I bet you can quite easily get that deal done right now. Yeah.
The thing I worry about him, and it's sort of like the thing I was worried about him in the rookie draft season. And I know that a lot of smart people, much smarter than me, told me not to worry about this. I always felt like he was like a one-trick pony. Like, he's the speed guy. He's going to take the lid off the defense. He's going to get open deep and open things up for your offense. But a lot of the pushback I received, no, Balky, this guy runs a full route tree. He's going to be, he has the speed, but he can do everything else. And now I look at him when he is involved in the game. It seems to me he's being more schemed in. And the great ones, the great first round picks, I never really felt like you needed to scheme them in. Their talent was just going to be good enough where they were going to get open, they were going to command the ball, and they were going to make plays with the ball. I'm not necessarily seeing that with Worthy, but I guess to your point, you know, the receiver room in Kansas City looks pretty crowded right now. At the end of this season, I guess it could be a lot less crowded.
Yes. Hollywood Brown also, remember, only on a 1-year deal.
Right,
so
exactly.
We assume we're going to get back Rashee Rice next year as well. We'll look entirely different. Yes, but I definitely believe in buying Xavier Worthy.
Dominic S on YouTube. I have Cade Otton, Taysom Hill, and Trey McBride. He needs to drop one. I can't, in good conscience, drop Trey McBride or Cade Otton. So I guess if you have to drop one, for me, it's Taysom Hill.
Oh, I was going to say Cade Otton.
Really? Why are you down on Cade Otton?
Because Cade Otton, all he did this entire time was soak up Mike Evans' role. Like Cade Otton was not used in the red zone, scoring touchdowns. And then if you look at their metrics behind the scenes without Evans, he literally took on like the 30%, 34% red zone target share, the end zone targets. Otton just literally replaced that. And so I worry about his upside with Evans back because, just think about it from a coaching staff, logically too, being in their shoes. Who are you going to throw to in the red zone? Mike Evans or Cade Otton? Pretty simple answer. Yeah.
Mike Evans every day of the week and every time on Sunday, essentially, is what it was. So Mike Evans has not played. Week 7 was Mike Evans' last game where he played for Tampa. Cade Otton, if we look at, so he got hurt in week 7. So if we look at the 2 games before that, and I'm picking at stats here, 3 for 44, 2 for 15. Evans goes down. 8 for 100, 9 for 81, 8 for 77. Last week, only 5 for 35, but still, the point is made. I will say that the 2 games in week 3 and week 4, Otton did have 7 for 47 and 6 for 52. However, that is a little bit neutered, I guess, given the fact that he's not topping 60 receiving yards, yet without Mike Evans, he was hitting 70-plus receiving yards with regularity. So I guess there is something to be said for that. Why, like the Taysom Hill aspect of this, is it, and he's on bye this week, obviously, but is it just the case of like they need playmakers and he's one of them?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. This is under Darren Rizzi. This is a Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara offense, and then MVS gets deep shots. But Taysom Hill's far too involved to be dropped. And again, this is not a situation anyone wants to be in. But right. Dominic has the question. He put himself in this position. You have to drop a good player. I'm not dropping Taysom Hill. There's no way. So he had 17 touches and he can play quarterback. Like there's no way. I'm zero chance I'm dropping him.
So you're keeping Hill and McBride. I guess when you explain, like, especially if we find out like Evans comes back this week and he gets like 7 for 110 and a touchdown, and Otton goes back to like 4 for 50, we'll know exactly what's going on in Tampa.
McBride, all the metrics behind the scenes, he literally has the best usage of all tight ends, a 3rd in target share, 3rd in yards per route run, the only tight end in the league running around on over 80% of dropbacks. He just hasn't scored a receiving touchdown. Those things regress on that style of usage, so I don't care. I'm not worried about McBride at all. And then, we have a signal. It could be wrong again, but we have a signal that Cade Otton is an entirely different player when Mike Evans is on the field.
Yeah, and that has been the case. At least that's the way that
it's a decision you don't want to make, but since we have to make it, I'm going to what I know. I'm going to the evidence.
You're going to the evidence, which is what all true great fantasy football detectives would do here.
Stop
that. Jordan Addison for Minnesota this week. If you have the chance to play him, would you do so? If your other option is Demario Douglas, who is going to be going down to South Beach to take on, they always say take on the fish. Dolphins are not fish. He's taking on the Dolphins in Miami this week. Jordan Addison for the Vikings is in Chicago to take on the Bears secondary, which will not have Jaquan Brisker this week because he's on IR. But the Bears pass defense, John, has been pretty stout this year.
Yeah.
But you're still going to say Jordan Addison.
I'm definitely going to say Jordan Addison. If only because Drake May doesn't really lean on one player. He's so good that he extends the play. And if you're open, you earn target from Drake May, not the opposite way around. So we just don't know ever who's going to hit for the Patriots, as proven this past week when everyone got excited by Kayshon Boutte, and it's instead Kendrick Bourne who leads with 70 receiving yards and a touchdown. So I like Douglas as a slot player. I think there will be games where we get a team allowing like the top 5 rate of points to slot receivers, and we know then to play Douglas. This necessarily isn't one of those games. So I'm just playing Addison.
How crucial is it for Drake May to get a bona fide playmaker in there? Because he's got a lot of guys that dance around that moniker. Demario Douglas has had his moments. Kendrick Bourne obviously had his moments the last couple of years. You have Jalen Polk, who I think they took him in the 2nd round this year as well. But May's been making it work so far with those guys.
Oh,
and Hunter Henry as well, I should say.
If we redid the draft today, I'm pretty sure I don't know who would go 1st or 2nd between Drake May and Jaden Daniels, but Caleb Williams would go 3rd.
Really?
And I think whoever you take number 1 overall, it would vary based on the person because that's how good Drake May has been. He's incredible.
Dude, okay, so like I'm not a Caleb Williams guy, but I also recognize that the offensive line that's been put in front of him has not been great. They're starting to get healthy now. In fact, I think they got a lot healthier last week. And I know Caleb Williams holds on to the ball longer than he should, but I am surprised to hear you say that it's almost a no-brainer that Williams goes third.
I don't even look at that. I know it sounds like it's a negative to Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams does have problems. I think that's more of a praise of Jaden Daniels and Drake May, who they are.
All right.
I mean, because you can blame the offensive line. Drake May's working behind the same offensive line, if not a worse one that Jacoby Brissett did, and it doesn't matter. Like, he's the one still who looks amazing right now. So I think it just ultimately comes down to who you are as a quarterback, and Drake May's been incredible, amazing, with much worse talent than Caleb Williams has, and a significantly worse offensive line than Caleb Williams has.
Caleb Williams would still go ahead of Bo Nix, though, for you, right?
Oh, yeah. I still like Bo Nix is better than we thought, but Bo Nix is still feasting off of an easy schedule and the same Oregon-style offense, which is a praise for Sean Payton, too. He saw what Bo Nix did and did not do well, and they said, all right, we're just going to call everything 4 yards from the line of scrimmage, and then the 2 or 3 times we need you to throw deep, Bo Nix, I need you to not turn the ball over. And what's happened the last 7 games now is that from a clean pocket, whenever he's not under duress, he has been much more accurate. He is truly developing in front of our eyes, but it's also against a really weak schedule. So I still have question marks about Bo Nix whenever it's a big matchup.
As long as we're talking Broncos here, I just realized I don't think I put this anywhere on the show sheet. Broncos running backs, just stay away for starting lineups. Do you have an inkling of who the guy is going to be on any given week?
I mean, we can definitely get the rug pulled out from us, as we saw in Estime, who I was already questionable about Estime anyways. I think I was one of the lowest on him in the industry, but I still like Javonte Williams. We still got 9 touches, over 50 rushing yards for Javonte Williams. It's another great matchup against this Raiders front 7. I wouldn't mind playing Javonte Williams as an RB2 at all this week.
Okay. All right. So Williams is the guy in that backfield for you.
I think so, yeah, because even when Estime handled those 14 carries, Williams still led him in routes run. That's how you provide multiple outs. That's how you provide a floor, is by being a pass catching back. And that's who Estime never was at Notre Dame. 26 catches across 37 career appearances, just a 5.4% target share in college as well. That was always my issue with Estime, is that he's only an early down bruiser and cannot earn targets at the next level. Not to mention, 3 fumbles going back to the preseason.
As far as injury away type guys, where does Jaleel McLaughlin factor into that for Denver?
The thing is, if Williams gets injured, I think that we've seen enough to where Estime would still get the carries and McLaughlin would get the targets. And then it's still a committee backfield. So I honestly probably don't have interest in either of them.
Okay.
It probably just isn't interesting.
It's not interesting. I was hoping you would make it interesting. And if you're not making it interesting, it's not interesting.
There's so many better options, even like Devin Singletary, Sean Tucker. There's so many options that have ceilings because they do everything when you get to that next tier of guys, as opposed to McLaughlin and Estime.
2:01 to go in the first quarter of the Browns and Steelers. Cleveland has just punted. The Steelers are taking the ball over at their own 10-yard line. No score. Russell Wilson up to 66 yards passing. Jerome Ford with an 8-yard catch. Nick Chubb, 11 yards rushing out of the backfield. Jalen Warren with 26. George Pickens now 2 catches for 34 yards. Producer Matt has told us that now the Steelers missed a 58-yard field goal, and they've been stopped on 4th and 2 so far in this game as well. So Steelers winning the game, just not winning the scoreboard right now.
Sure.
Rashad Bateman or Xavier Legette? We talked about Legette a little bit earlier with Carolina taking on Kansas City. Bateman is an interesting guy in a game that features a total of 51 on Monday Night Football. He's not the number 1 option. He's probably not the number 2 option either. Maybe he's the number 3. I don't even know about that. But Bateman or Legette this week for starter sit, John?
I will take the deep shots in Bateman because I think that'll still give him a better chance to outscore Legette, if only because we just don't know, as we talked about earlier, what's going to happen with the Panthers receiver rotation.
Mm-hmm. And it's again, maybe I'm biased in this, but I think the stars come out on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. When the lights go on, I think these guys get activated somehow. And so that's why I'd say Bateman. It's not why I would say Bateman over Legette, but that's another thing in his favor.
Chiefs also like one of those teams. I can't remember the exact number, but they're bottom 3 and points allowed to receivers from out wide. That's where Leggett runs all his routes. So
okay.
it's just one of the tough matchups that we know, like logically, even off the top of our heads, we don't play outside receivers against Steve Spagnuolo.
Okay. Moving on to tight ends, we'll stick with the Ravens here. Mark Andrews, a guy who has been up and down, maybe more so down this season. Obviously, Isaiah Likely entered the picture and entered back into the picture this past week with 4 for 71. If you had a choice between Mark Andrews or Tucker Kraft, a lot of teams drafted Andrews as their starter. Tucker Kraft is their backup, or maybe they picked him up off of waivers. Who would you play this week if you can only play one, Andrews or Kraft?
Speaking of things we know off the back of our head, you don't play tight ends against the 49ers. I don't even need to tell you the metrics, because like all you have to know is they have Fred Warner, and they've played Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers. They played the best of the best and limited them across the board. So don't play Tucker Kraft, just play Mark Andrews.
Slam dunk for Mark Andrews here over Kraft then. Okay,
absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Cole Kmet, who I think, did he get in the end zone last week against Green Bay? I can't remember.
I don't think so. I could be wrong.
All right, I'll look that up. Him or Dalton Schultz this week. Dalton Schultz, who is going up against the Tennessee Titans, John.
Touchdown or bust. Vikings. I think I go Cole Kmet, just because in that first month with Nico Collins playing, Dalton Schultz totaled 25.5 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's at least PPR, not tight end premium. But basically, he was a touchdown or bust option. At least we saw that under Thomas Brown, no other tight end was involved. So I'll take Cole Kmet's usage over Schultz.
Cole Kmet did not get in the end zone last week. He did have his best week since week 6, though. 3 for 42 against the Packers. Under Shane Waldron, the previous 3 weeks, 2 for 13, a bagel, and then 1 for 14 the previous game against the Commanders. So, yeah, I mean, maybe it's on the come up for Kmet. Dalton Schultz, again, has to contend with not only Tank Dell, but now the return of Nico Collins to that lineup as well, which is going to take targets away from him. You're saying Kmet. I think I will lean towards Kmet here as well in this matchup. And then the final the final tight end starter sit I want to talk about is one that, again, another one of those decisions you don't want to have to make, but some people are going to, especially if they're missing, some of these guys on bye this week. AJ Barner in Seattle, who caught 2 catches for 15 yards on 4 targets last week, or Noah Gray from the Chiefs. And before we laugh at Noah Gray against the Panthers, bear in mind this dude caught 4 passes for 23 yards against Buffalo last week for 2 touchdowns. Are you kidding me? And a guy that has been able to make plays over the middle for Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if his snap share is going to go up if the Chiefs take control of this game right away and Travis Kelce's snap share goes down. I'll let you weigh in on that. But between Barner or Gray, who makes the better start this week, Mr. Daigle?
I'm personally starting Barner for the usage. A route on 86% of dropbacks the last 2 games without Noah Fant. If Noah Fant plays, I would then start Noah Gray. I don't trust Noah Gray, who only popped up for 1 game here. There's nothing consistent in those 2 touchdowns. So I'm playing Barner.
Getting back to Dominic's question here on YouTube, he has the opportunity, instead of dropping Cade Otton, he could trade him and Romeo Doubs and get either Rome Odunze or Jalen Waddle. And when he says, look, I got to drop Otton anyway, maybe I get something better for him. Well, yeah, Doubs to Waddle, I'm definitely in favor of him. I know Waddle's numbers have been down, but I'd much rather have Jalen Waddle than Romeo Doubs at this point. If for no other reason, then I kind of know what I'm getting from Jalen Waddle when I start him. I don't necessarily know what I'm getting with Romeo Doubs.
I would choose Odunze over Waddle.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, we at least got Odunze in 2 wide receiver sets out of the bye. Still someone who's prone, as long as he continues getting that usage, to emerge among the Bears wideouts as much as he can anyways. Whereas Waddle, I truly think this is here to stay. I just think it's the way they run their offense this year. That's why, like, for instance, Tyreek Hill last season led the Dolphins in target share from Tua at 31%. This year, he's leading the Dolphins in target share at 20% because it's just a different offense. They use too many people now, and that's why Waddle is behind Jonnu Smith and basically bumped up right next to Devon Achane, who's also earning targets. So I would choose Odunze. I think he has a higher ceiling than Waddle in this version of their offenses.
Looking forward to 2025, which Bears receiver would you draft first? Odunze or DJ Moore?
Okay. Odunze, personally, yeah. Moore is a player I had issues drafting to begin with at his price because unlike a lot of players, like let's say CeeDee Lamb or Malik Neighbors don't score a touchdown, they still provide a floor because they get peppered targets. DJ Moore last year in the games he didn't score a touchdown was the wide receiver 54 in points per game, which is not usable. He needs to score a touchdown in order to be usable, and I don't like those kind of players at like 4th round costs. So I didn't draft DJ Moore anyways.
Are you of the opinion, and I was talking with on one of my other shows, 2009 FFPC main event champion Don Metter, who is a massive Bears fan, lives in Chicago, and I was where you are as well, which is why I want to ask you this question. Are you of the opinion, given the maybe higher than we should have expectations of the Bears offense this year, and knowing where they're probably going to get drafted next year, because of a depressed fantasy value season, you think Bears are actually going to be guys that we want to buy in redraft? Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore to a certain extent, Cole Kmet to a certain extent, DeAndre Swift if he's back with the Bears. Are these going to be depressed values in 2025 drafts, John?
I think so. We're going to condense the target tree too, because there's no way they bring Keenan Allen back.
No.
Like on a 1-year deal, and they've already pretty much grown tired of him. So he'll be gone. And Odunze just has that, the profile of players we want to chase. A top 10 overall pick in the NFL draft, led the nation in both targets, 20 yards downfield, and contested catches. He's fast as well and big bodied. Like he's just a prototypical X receiver. So he's someone we definitely want to bet on at a lower cost.
We have not touched the quarterbacks yet this week as far as starter sits, and I'm going to start off with a heavy hitter here between Jaden Daniels, who we talked about already, probably having a good bounce back game against the Cowboys. Would you play him over Kyler Murray, who is taking on Seattle? I honestly, in quarterback starter set questions like this, John, I usually lean towards the guy who is using his legs, and both of these guys can use their legs pretty well. Daniels maybe less so the last few weeks because he was recovering from that rib injury, and I don't know how much he's been running because of that. But Kyler Murray is still making big plays with his legs. Normally, I would say, okay, well, it's Murray here. But I think based on what you were telling me before about what you expect to see from the Commanders' offense against Dallas this week, I think I lean towards Daniels over Murray here.
Yeah, he has. My issue with Murray is that I can't pinpoint it. He has 4 top 5 finishes this year, but then his other 6 starts, none inside the top 10. It's a very roller coaster production that he gives you, whereas Daniels, I still trust personally. 10 days rest again. The easiest defense in the league right now to play against in the Cowboys. Even in the 6 games Micah Parsons has started, the Cowboys are allowing a league high 8.5 yards per attempt. So I just think Jaden Daniels, it's a ceiling game coming up for him.
The update I want to give right now on the game, there is something going on. It looks like a Najee Harris loses 3 yards, and he may or may not have fumbled on the play.
Tell me that.
Yeah, which Pittsburgh has taken timeout. It looks like Russell Wilson recovered it. So it still will remain Pittsburgh ball, 2nd and 13. Harris, 5 carries for 11 yards. Jalen Warren, already 5 carries for 27 yards. Warren does not have a catch. Harris does have a catch for 3 yards on the game. The reason that Pittsburgh has the ball deep in Cleveland territory, they have it right now at Cleveland's 27. Russell Wilson hit Calvin Austin with a 46-yard reception. So that is why they've gotten this far down there. Harris, it looks like he is coming out. No, he's coming. I should stop talking he's coming back into the game. So they did not lift him because of this fumble, and it is 2nd and 13 from inside the Cleveland 30.
Calvin Austin is only in 2 because Van Jefferson was injured. I got that alert. And remember, the last time Van Jefferson was injured, that's when Calvin Austin hit a 50-yard touchdown in the 3rd quarter. He's only been usable whenever Van Jefferson is out of the way, and Calvin Austin is the better player, so I don't know why he doesn't play anyways over Van Jefferson, but okay, that's interesting. That makes Calvin Austin interesting on waivers for next week too.
Definitely. Russell Wilson, as Matt Deutsch is pointing out here tonight, 10 of 10 for 126 yards so far.
Wow.
So good on him. Yeah, very, very impressive showing from Russell Wilson. So
Tell you when, just you never look to the weather. Never worry about the weather.
Never worry about the weather. Exactly. Okay, so that was Daniels versus Murray, and you're saying Daniels just because Murray's a little bit too sporadic. Okay. Yeah. We talked about this earlier. Jared Goff or Bo Nix. Nix, as you pointed out, has feasted on a pretty soft schedule so far. It's not tightening up yet this week as they go to Las Vegas to take on the 2-8 Raiders. Would you still play him over Jared Goff, or is that Lions offense just too tempting and you got to play Goff over Nix?
Well, it's such a soft matchup for Bo Nix against the Raiders, too. I'll take the rushing floor. I think these quarterbacks are close, so I'm going to take Bo Nix, who is the QB9 in points per game right now.
So Nix is the play, 6-point favorites in Las Vegas this week. Again, when you look at that Lions game, it seems juicy, 50.5. But remember, the Lions are more than a touchdown favorite in that game. Could be a big-time Montgomery and Gibbs game where Goff in his skills. The thing is, Goff has been so efficient. He could still have solid days like 16 for 17 or 16 for 18 for 200 some yards and 2 touchdowns. Doesn't even have to throw it all that much. So
And Goff is still Goff. Like, it always comes down to, can you pressure him like the Texans did on Sunday night? He then becomes Goff again. There's a reason why he's the number 1 overall pick. And Sean McVay said, I can't win a Super Bowl with this guy because his limitations are well known.
I think it was Nick Wright on, I want to say Fox Sports, said that he can't call the Lions the best team in the league as long as they have a civilian as their starting quarterback, which is not true.
That's a good way to put it.
But still funny. Yeah. Okay,
so it's like the Ravens too. I can't. First of all, it's the Chiefs' title to lose. Let's all get that clear. Even if you're sick of the Chiefs, which I'm not, I'll never get sick of Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs are the champions until they say otherwise. So I don't care what the rest of the league is doing. But it's also like the Chiefs don't really have issues. They're great on defense. They will get the job done on offense always because they have an alien at quarterback. Whereas like the Ravens are fun, but their defense sucks and Justin Tucker sucks. Like they should actually, anyone not named Judd Tucker would have been cut by now by them, but he has too big of a resume for them to get away. And it's absolutely going to cost them in the playoffs. And like when it comes down to the inches that matters. So I'm worried about the Ravens still. The Eagles have shown like their limitations as well, although their defense has gotten much better. And then the Niners too, again, red zone struggles, not an explosive offense so far without Brandon Ayuk. So it's still the Chiefs title, regardless of what people think about how good other teams are.
What's the Achilles heel for Buffalo?
That they struggle to beat the Chiefs in the postseason. That's literally it. I will say the best part about it this past game was Sean McDermott finally understanding the assignment, because previously he would only kick field goals against the Chiefs on 4th down. This one, they finally said, okay, like we obviously cannot beat Patrick Mahomes unless you actually try to beat Patrick Mahomes. 4th and 2, they give the ball to Josh Allen. He scores that explosive 30-yard rushing touchdown. In the past, McDermott is a coward and kicks a field goal there. So as long as the Bills have it figured out, it's going to always then come down to the last possession, and you better not give Mahomes the last possession. That's the only rule.
That's very true. Very true. They have gone to commercial on Prime Video. Boswell hits a 48-yarder to finally break the scoring open in this game. 10:53 to go in the first half. Pittsburgh now on top 3-0. They will be kicking off when they return. And Wilson, 10 of 10, 128 yards. He's been the star of the game so far. We'll see what Cleveland has on this possession after we sign off. Last question I want to have for you tonight, John. Jordan Love against the Niners. Baker Mayfield against the Giants. Listening to you talk about that Packers-Niners game, I feel like you're leaning towards Mayfield here.
I think so. Yeah, because we finally get confidence in their wide receiver room back. No idea if Mike Evans will play the full helping. He's been practicing practice full. They just got off their bye, so gave him an extended time to rest too. So I think we get back to being like the Baker of old, who was always a top 7 quarterback in fantasy and a very good spot against the Giants.
So, even if Evans, let's throw it like this, even if Evans does not return his full complement of snaps, wouldn't you think Otten would then soak up what he is not offering them when he's not on the field? Or is that too big of a leap to come to here?
Yes, I believe that.
Okay.
But again, Evans is going to play every snap. And then we've
He
seen
is. Okay.
Evans, if Evans is at full strength, he's going to play every snap. And again, when you look at this, because we're going back to the drop question about Cade Otton, right?
Yeah.
that just comes down to dropping K-Dot or the other guys. I don't think of it. And it's also long-term. So we're not just looking at if Evans is limited this game. The Bucs are 2 games back in the division. I have a bet that they're going to win it at plus 350 as well, because the Falcons are a very clearly weak team that is just continuing to get worse down the stretch. They're going to have to play Evans at full strength eventually. And then again, it comes down to rest of season, where I think Taysom and McBride are just better options to have over Rotten anyways.
Guy we will never drop from this program is John Daigle from Establish the Run at Not J Daigle on the X. John, can you just tell us? I mean, I know everything that you're producing, you're pretty much posting on X, but EstablishTheRun.com is the best place to go, and then obviously your X to consume more John Daigle content, right?
Yeah, the name is right there on the screen,
right?
Not J Daigle, and then EstablishTheRun.com. We're going to run a Thanksgiving sale. We never run sales. We're pretty much sticklers about that. But we are going to run a Thanksgiving sale next week, so stay tuned for that. And then also the Establish the Run podcast feed is where you can get all your free shit. So just go there. Even this past week, we did a playoff-specific building your fantasy roster for weeks 15 through 17. Nothing else but players to target for weeks 15 through 17, ideal quarterbacks and defenses to stash and stream in weeks 15 through 17. It's literally everything you could ask for. We ignore the rest of the weeks leading up to it. So that's for free on the podcast feed.
And I listened to it. For all the FFPC viewers out there, this is the candy you're looking for. Consume it again. It was great stuff. This is the kind of stuff that sets you up for $1 million grand prizes. The stuff that Jack Miller, Adam Levitan, and who was the other one on that program too?
Mark Dank, who is also among the projections team. And I think the best part about it is that, unlike a lot of shows, it's partly my fault, but I'll disagree. Like, I will happily, like, I do the research myself. I will happily disagree with anyone on that show if we come to a different opinion. Although I listen and respect everyone's opinion. So I think a lot of people listen to a lot of shows and everyone's just nodding their head. We do not nod our heads. At least I don't nod my head. Right.
Yes. That's what you want. We don't want to be in an echo chamber, and you are not.
No.
On the Establish the Run podcast, EstablishTheRun.com. Check that out. MyFFPC.com is where to go for the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Enter for as little as $35. Win up to $2,500. No draft or no salary cap. You can formulate these teams in minutes and get them in before 1 p.m. on Sunday, so you can take advantage of all this extra FFPC action. We'll be back. No show next Thursday because it's Thanksgiving. So Tuesday night at 7:00, Football Guys Dave Kluge is going to join me for a full 2 hours. That's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching tonight. For John Daigle and our producer, Matt Deutsch, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Enjoy the rest of the game tonight, guys.